Number 10. Swarm. If you have a fear of bees, or more specifically mutated killer bees, then you might find the story of Fritz von Meyer to be terrifying. Meyer became a sometime Spider-Man villain after his transformation into basically a horde of killer bees. He was a scientist in the employ of the German Axis forces during World War II. Not much is known of his backstory previous to that, but with unlimited funding, he set out to study poisons, toxins, and bees. Finding an apparently mutated hive of bees, he attempted to awaken their killer instincts and seize control of them. But his plan backfired, and they ended up gaining back their killer instincts and using them to swarm and kill Meyer. Meyer's consciousness, however, became absorbed into the bees as his physical form died, and as such, he is now a man who is made up entirely of bees. If that isn't something out of a nightmare, I really don't know what is. Number 9. Swamp Thing. Alec Holland is believed by Swamp Thing himself to be the man that the creature once was. Alec Holland and his wife were living out in the swamp and were both scientists who had developed a biorestorative formula that would solve world hunger. However, goons were sent to sabotage and destroy the discovery during this original origin story. The goons put explosives in the lab, and Alec woke up following the explosion covered in the biorestorative formula. He ran out into the swamp but found himself merged with it, becoming an avatar of the green, merging with that swamp and becoming the monstrous creature known as Swamp Thing. Originally in the comics, Swamp Thing, believing it had once been Alec, was always trying to find a way to return to a more human state, longing to be mortal once more. Number 8. John Constantine. We recently got an interesting look into John Constantine's origins in the new DC Black Label limited series Rise and Fall. Hellblazer Rise and Fall. That's the whole long title. This is a story divided up and told over the course of 3 books. In the first book, we are told of Constantine's backstory and everything that has shaped him into the lovable troublemaker of an occult detective that he has become today. His life started in the dark from the moment he was born. His mother passed away, bringing him into the world, which set the stage for what his life would then be like. His father turned to drink and treated young John harshly, never once sympathizing with his son, which only motivated John to become more of a young vagabond, staying out and running around the streets of London late at night. We also learn of the tragic loss of one of his childhood friends in the book. Truly, it's a must-read for Constantine fans, or just for fans of good comics. Number 7. Batman. The death of Batman's parents and the trauma he suffered from witnessing that as a young boy would forever change Bruce. It would turn him into the vigilante he is today and inspire him to set out on a mission to become the Dark Knight, dedicating his life to an intense training regimen and traveling the world to learn from a variety of masters on a variety of subjects, from detective work to martial arts to magic. To this day, it's still the death of Bruce Wayne's parents that remains one of the most tragic events in his life, still haunting him to the point that he's even seen hallucinating about his parents' death while tripping on Joker venom during the current events of Joker War. Always tends to be the thing he comes back to. That and currently the loss of Alfred. Number 6. Sentry. Robert Reynolds was a drug addict who snuck into a lab and discovered the experimental Golden Sentry serum, though the backstory he'd be given in the comics within the Marvel Universe later on would be much less dark. Consuming the serum granted, Reynolds gained the power of 1,000,000 exploding suns, making him one of the most powerful superheroes ever known. Although the Sentry was a hero who was known for his Superman-like extreme level of goodness, he had a dark secret, one that was unknown even to him for a very long time. Bob Reynolds suffered from a split personality disorder, in part brought on by the villain Mastermind's manipulations, which meant that he was not only capable of immense good, but immense evil as well, as his personality split into that of the superheroic Sentry and the powerful supervillain known as the Void. When it was revealed that Bob himself was also the greatest villain on the planet, he recruited the help of his superhero friends such as Doctor Strange and Mr. Fantastic to help everyone, including Bob, forget about the Sentry, so that the Void would also never return, making Bob, for a time, the greatest hero that the world forgot. Number 5. Rorschach. Walter Kovacs was raised by a mother who mistreated him, basically resenting his very existence. This mistreatment inspired Walter to stand up to those who would hurt others. These beliefs led to Walter himself to brutally confront his own schoolyard bullies, even going so far as to blind one of them as a child. Walter became a sociopath because of how he was treated when he was younger, believing in a strict moral code and using that as his own vigilante compass to decide who should be punished and how severely. His mother was a prostitute, and when he learned of her death at the hands of her pimp, who force-fed her Drano to kill her, he only responded with one word: good. Ooh, dark. Number 4. Jessica Jones. In the Netflix Jessica Jones series, we learn that Jessica Jones became a detective and hero in essence because of the fact that she was assaulted and mind-controlled by Purple Man, who made her to do all sorts of things that she didn't want to do. In the Alias series, Jessica Jones attempts to confront her trauma, wrestling with just how much control Kilgrave actually had over her, and if it's possible that part of her motivation for all of the things he had her do could have actually come somehow from within herself. This is a common thing with victims of this type of assault, wondering about how much responsibility or control you actually had in that situation, and in a sense blaming yourself for what happened to you. But beyond this, Jessica Jones's original origins, how she got her powers, actually involved a massive vehicular collision, where her entire family was killed except for her. And it's implied that she only survived because she was exposed to radioactive materials, whose containers were damaged in the accident, leaking out and interacting with Jessica. Jessica's original last name had been Campbell, and she didn't get her name Jones until she was later adopted by Alyssa Jones and her husband, after Jessica's family's death. Ugh. Actually, Jessica seems to be a bit of a cursed name in the Marvel Universe. There's a lot of Jessicas with dark origins. Number 3. Magneto. Well known for a long time in the comics by his alias Eric Magnus Lenscher, Magneto's original name and origins revealed that he grew up as a young Jewish boy during World War II named Max Eisenhardt. His family left Germany when things started to get bad, retreating to Warsaw where they lived in the Warsaw Ghetto. Eventually, Max was taken to the extermination camp at Auschwitz after he and his family attempted to leave the Warsaw Ghetto. Following his time at Auschwitz, Max shed his original name and adopted another so that he might better fit in with his wife Magda's Romani people. When it comes to Magneto's backstory, he is no stranger to discrimination, and it is his suffering and the suffering of others that he has witnessed that has inspired him to become the villain and the sometimes hero that we know today. Number 2. Red Hood. When it comes to Jason Todd's transformation from Robin to Red Hood, there was a ton of dark events that came into play here, which caused Jason Todd to go from hero to villain, and then of course to anti-hero. Todd was seemingly one of the permanent deaths in comics after he was beaten to near death by the Joker, following being sold out by his own birth mother, who he then even still fought to free before being killed in an explosion. We thought we'd never see him return, but he was later brought back using the Lazarus Pit, and then was trained by Dukra of the All Cast and joined the League of Assassins for a time. When he finally returned to Gotham, it was originally as the villain Red Hood, seeking brutal justice, and later on, as Joker would say in 3 Jokers Book 1, becoming one of his own villainous creations. Ooh, so dark. When you realize you've become a thing you didn't want to be and someone evil made you that. Eee. Number 1. Wolverine. Wolverine has more trauma in his life than all the X-Men put together. Actually, he's probably got more trauma in one pinky than all of the X-Men. The only thing that protects Wolverine from the darkness of his own multi-chapter tragic origins is the fact that his brain actually also uses his healing factor to basically rid him of undesirable or painful memories. Young James Howlett's powers first manifested when his birth father killed his foster father, the husband of his mother. In a rage, James used his bone claws to kill his birth father, Thomas Logan, and his mother, still recovering from the loss of her firstborn son, severely traumatized, then took her own life. There are a lot of things that came after that when it comes to Wolverine's story and his past, pretty much all of them being wrapped up in some kind of traumatic experience. Number 10. Doctor Strange. Dr. Stephen Strange was an accomplished and world-renowned surgeon until a tragic car accident. While he survived the crash, the nerves in his hands were severely damaged, making it impossible for him to recover well enough to return to his work as a neurosurgeon. Strange was egotistical to the point that he refused to do any other work in the medical community, attempting to use all of his funds to try and find a cure for his hands, and eventually sinking into a deep depression and alcohol addiction. Previous to his accident, it was his parents' death and the fact that he found great success early on that caused him to become materialistic in his pursuits, caring less and less for his patients and more about the acclaim and the money that he was making. Eventually, he heard of the mystical power of the Ancient One and used his last bit of money to set out to see if they might possess healing abilities strong enough to heal him. From there, he would become a reluctant, stubborn, and eventually extremely loyal and determined student, and would go on to become the new Sorcerer Supreme and magical hero known as Doctor Strange. Number 9. Iron Man. Tony Stark has led quite the privileged life, basically being born with a silver spoon in his mouth, so you might think he's got it made when it comes to superhero origins. But let's not forget what it took to get him to build and operate his Iron Man suit, and what inspired him to become a hero. Tony Stark was giving a demonstration of his technology to the military when there was an explosion. Stark was injured and taken prisoner by a terrorist who wanted to use his brilliant mind to have him create weapons for them. Shrapnel lodged into Tony Stark's chest moved ever closer to his heart, and it was the help of another brilliant prisoner, Nobel Prize winner, and physicist Ho Yinsen, whom Stark admired, that allowed Tony to survive and inspired him to build the Iron Man Mark I armor, which allowed him to escape but at the cost of Yinsen's life, and put him on the path to becoming a hero. Number 8. Rocket Raccoon. Rocket Raccoon in the Marvel Cinematic Universe alludes to his character's dark origins when he gets into an argument with the other Guardians of the Galaxy, insisting they consider him to be a joke, and revealing that there is a lifetime of pain in his past which gives him the form and personality that he has today, as a being who was heavily experimented on, being torn apart and put back together more times than he can count. Previous to this origins though, in the comics, Rocket was simply one of a group of animals given heightened intelligence and awareness by robotic beings, who sought to escape their duties of looking after mental patients in their care. Rocket was one of the animals who stepped in to take on these duties. Later on, however, even in the comics, while out exploring space, he would be abducted and taken to a place known as Lab World, where he was then studied and experimented on. Number 7. Two-Face. Harvey Dent went from being on the side of the law and one of the biggest real-life everyday fighters for justice in Gotham to becoming one of the city's most iconic villains. It all started when he was disfigured. During a trial, crime boss Sal Maroni threw acid in Dent's face, scarring him for life and driving him insane. Dent lost his faith in justice as a result of this incident and instead left it up to fate to decide whether he would behave heroically or criminally, often known for flipping a coin to decide his victim's fate. Number 6. Spider-Man. Spider-Man's whole brooding and moody sensibility and his battle with depression, which would only grow over time, all stems back to his origins. The death and loss of Uncle Ben is what inspired Spider-Man to become a hero and also gives him a lifetime of weighty regret. Uncle Ben's death could have been avoided in Spider-Man's mind if only he'd cared enough to use his powers to stop a thief in his path, who would shortly after end Ben's life. To Peter Parker, he may as well have pulled the trigger himself. This tragic and dark story would inspire the hero to use his powers more responsibly, but would also haunt him for the rest of his life. Number 5. Dr. Manhattan. John Osterman's origin story as Dr. Manhattan is truly horrific. John found himself trapped inside a test chamber when he went to retrieve his watch, as it underwent a scheduled experiment. The experiment caused John to be taken apart at an atomic level, removing his intrinsic field, which is a term used in Watchmen to describe what holds atoms together, the force that does that. It's not actually a true scientific term, fun fact. As such, he was granted powers over the intrinsic fields of all things, using his powers to build himself a body 3 months later and physically manifesting in the cafeteria of his workplace. John's life would be forever changed, and in becoming a god, he would not only look different, but would also become less human as the years went on, experiencing a detached feeling from life on Earth. Number 4. Batman. Bruce Wayne was just a young boy when he lost his parents. They were both killed point blank in front of him one night after the family had left the movie theater where they just watched Zorro, and attempted to take a shortcut down an alley. A thief named Joe Chill killed them during a robbery, leaving Bruce alone in the world, save for the family butler, Alfred, who had become like a father to him. It was this tragic start to his life that caused young Bruce to grow up fast and run in with a bat that inspired him to become the Dark Knight of Gotham, known as Batman. It's also been argued countless times over that this traumatic event made young Bruce unstable, which is perhaps why he has turned to a life of vigilantism, unable to heal the mental wounds his parents' tragic deaths caused. Number 3. Gamora. Gamora is the last surviving member of her race, known as the Zen Huberis. They were a peaceful people who were all killed by a religious order when they resisted their attempt at dominance in the galaxy. Thanos managed to save Gamora and raised her as his daughter, turning her into his own weapon, modifying her with tech to grant her superhuman abilities. He planned on using her to defeat the villain known as Magus, who was also Thanos' enemy. While Thanos seemed to occasionally show Gamora fatherly affection, there would come a time when she would turn on him, acknowledging him as someone who had used her for his own means and denouncing her allegiance to him, seeing him for what he was, a mad tyrant and a villain who was selfish and cold-hearted, seeking only to bring death to whatever planet, galaxy, or universe he was in. Number 2. Raven. If we go back to the original New Earth continuity, Raven's origins are pretty freaking dark. Her mother was part of a cult, and when she tried to escape and leave, the members prevented her from doing so by summoning a powerful demon named Trigon. This demon then forcefully mated with her. From this, Raven was conceived. She was born Angela Roth and raised to control her emotions, to help prevent her from losing control of her demonic powers and to basically prevent her from giving in to the dark side. She was sort of like a Jedi, but with a demonic heritage. When she learned of Trigon's evil plans, she attempted to stop him and sought help from the Justice League, who actually refused to help her because of her demonic heritage, prompting Raven to work harder to become a hero and putting her on a path to become one of the Teen Titans. Number 1. Spawn. Spawn was originally Albert Al Simmons, an assassin who was murdered by his friend while on a mission. He then is condemned to a life in hell, but makes a bargain to return to the land of the living so that he can see his wife one last time. However, he must agree to become a Hellspawn in order to do so. The unfortunate side effect of which, that he doesn't learn until later, is that he will forget his memories somewhat, so he returns to life, but only as a faint recollection of his past. And what's more, his body is still kinda undead, making him appear as a horrific monster. So even if he had remembered his wife's name straight away, he would not be able to reveal himself to her. When he finally does remember his wife, he discovers she is remarried to one of his friends, and they now have a daughter. He also realizes that 5 years have passed since his death. Not what he had originally expected when he made that bargain. Spawn, lost in the world, is now forced to search for a new purpose while also conserving his powers, as once they're fully used up, he will return to hell. Number 10. Songs of the Orphan Child. This is a more weird, twisty moment that is part of a longer, more confusing story, and this moment makes it pretty weird and also adds to the confusion. This moment comes to us from X-Men X-23's solo series, one of anyways. In her 2010 series, we see her take on Miss Sinister, who is really Claudia Ranko, a woman who was implanted with a genetic virus that basically transformed her into Mr. Sinister following his death. However, Mr. Sinister sought to use Miss Sinister's body to return fully, even shapeshifting or exploding into his true form, as Miss Sinister sought to gain more control over this new form herself, in essence becoming an independent though still villainous entity. This allowed us to get a moment at the end of issue 5 where we see Mr. Sinister bloodily break through Miss Sinister, popping out from beneath her form, like a hideous magic trick. Blah. Mr. Sinister had returned. However, in the next comic he instantly disappears, turning back into Miss Sinister once more. So this whole shocking cliffhanger is instantly erased in terms of its importance for his full return. Gotta sell those comics, I guess.
Number 9. The Pizza Hut Collector's Edition. There's a few locations that would be perfect for a fight. I mean, New York City gets a lot of attention in superhero movies. Usually the climax will take place in a well-known area so people can watch and be like, wow, I was right there to think I was that close to Dr. Octopus. That's so crazy. It's nice having some sort of real life relations to a comic book story because they're pretty far-fetched, so the second you throw in some common name or common place, you can't help but attach yourself to the storyline more so. But what if the climax happened and then all of a sudden Pizza Hut. Yeah, you heard me. So back in 1993, before I even existed, there was an X-Men issue, rather there were 4 issues that were part of this X-Men Collector's Edition comics, with the 4th issue saying right on the cover, "Explosive Finale, brought to you by Pizza Hut." Yeah, so they sold these comics back then in Pizza Huts, about Cyclops and Bishop when the climax is them going into a computer, and it's pretty wacky. They're like, whoa, all the cyberspace is warping around us. The visuals are all retro, green and yellow. Then this giant face appears, and it's none other than Arcade. He compromised Cerebro's core, or did he? So the fact that this is like a Pizza Hut comic series is hilarious because it's a good story, but then Pizza Hut's like, hey, don't forget about us. Like you could straight up go in, order a pizza, grab a comic book, and then pay at the counter. That would be the best day ever, hands down. The end of the series was a little odd, however. See, it was all Professor X and he was testing the X-Men. And he finishes the 4th and final issue with a little monologue about how he can always rely on a few good mutants to get the job done. And then Jubilee's like, yeah, for sure. Anyways, anyone wants some pizza? And then, yeah, it's an advertisement. It's just like, hey, check this out. Psych, medium pepperoni, debit.
Number 8. Star Trek / X-Men. As weird as this one sounds, it actually made more sense than some other straight up X-Men stories. This crossover comic titled just Star Trek / X-Men saw our favorite mutants teaming up with the original series crew of the Starship Enterprise. The worlds collided due to a rift in space, through which Proteus was able to move through and take hold of the long dead crewmate Gary Mitchell. In this issue, we get to see some pretty great shared moments between the two teams. Both Bones and Beast respond when Dr. McCoy is called upon, and Wolverine gets knocked out by Spock's Vulcan nerve pinch. Marvel character Gladiator is also featured in the issue and even punches Captain Kirk's ship full on, much to his surprise.
And number 7. Young Dragons in Love. Love is a beautiful thing. It comes in all shapes and sizes, even that of, well, a dragon. We go now to X-Men issue 181 titled Young Dragons in Love. This 1984 comic opens with quite possibly the 2 best images ever. The first opening shot is a group of bystanders looking up, being like, look up in the sky. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? Is it a... And then one guy's like, it's a dragon. And then in the next picture, the dragon is so stupidly large. Like, it's way above them. They're right directly underneath it. You would see this dragon from miles away. Like, they're all just staring, trying to figure it out. Hey, if you thought that was a plane, you might need some glasses. I don't know, just an idea. This issue is quite fun. It shows the group of people flipping through the book, trying to figure out if it's the Hulk or whoever. Then they're like, man, everybody at school will be so jealous we discovered a new monster. Sure. So out of this dragon falls the X-Men, and they start losing their shit. They're like asking for autographs, they're talking about Storm's hair change, thinking if it's like good or not. They probably worked for TMZ now that I think about it. The comic is just them trying to fight this dragon, and also a smaller dragon that makes noises that like contribute to the conversation. Like someone will say something, and then the little dragon will be like, sigh, after a line, but it's all smoky and dragon-like. It's amazing. And when it comes to Marvel and dragons, after Ragnarok, I think we can pull this one off on the big screen. I'll paint myself green, I'll send in a self-tape. I'll be the dragon. Done and done. Let's do it.
Number 6, performance. This story comes to us from Uncanny X-Men Annual Issue number 10, where we are first introduced to Longshot, who of course comes from the Mojoverse. During this issue, while Longshot also shows up, so does a bunch of Mojo's goo. Yep. Mojo's goo. And the panels we get involving this evil plot and the goo are, well, there's something. Mojo's plan is to capture the X-Men and bring them to Mojo World to have them perform live. So he sends Longshot and the aforementioned goo, which depowers the mutants and also turns them into children. In the end, it's up to the new mutants to save the transformed core X-Men of the day, which also happen to include Magneto.
Number 5, Mojo's Media Madness. Remember that low-budget indie film that came out in like 1939? It was called The Wizard of Oz, I think it was. I think Oz. Had this younger singer, Judy Garfield, something like that. I don't know, not really well known. Only a handful of people have seen it, I guess. I don't know. This next X-Men issue takes the question we never knew we needed an answer to. That question being, what if the X-Men were in The Wizard of Oz? Yeah, so that villain Mojo is known for using Earth as forms of television entertainment for the universe. So in 1992, the issue titled Mojo's Media Madness had this epically weird storyline where Mojo gets Rogue, Cyclops, Beast, and Wolverine to think that they are characters from The Wizard of Oz. So Wolverine is talking like a cowardly lion, and it's actually quite hilarious. I feel like this type of story is what WandaVision is going to end up feeling like on Disney+. Just a lot of weird references and lines, opposite of how the character normally is. So if you want to see for yourself, make sure you check out X-Men issue 10 from 1997.
Number 4, Something Slimy This Way Comes. This is a bizarre story where Professor X decided to throw a surprise birthday party for Kitty Pryde, and hired the most inappropriate clown, Obnoxio, for the party. In this first panel, we see Obnoxio smoking a cigar and thinking about how he's going to spend the pile of money that the professor promised him. The even weirder part of this story is that while this crazy party is going down with this ridiculous clown, the X-Mansion is infiltrated by a villainous mutant who can turn himself into ice cream, appropriately named Ice Cream, but spelled like an eyeball and the shrieking sound that is referred to as a scream. What's more is no one seems to know that Obnoxio was coming. I guess it's a super secret surprise? And Obnoxio also ends up in a ridiculous fight with the X-Men. Not only that, he actually doesn't do too bad.
And number 3, X-Babies? Mojo has popped up a few times on this list now, and for good reason. We've seen super babies before, whether it's in Amazon Prime's The Boys or Baby Grinch. Yeah, that part always hurt my teeth. I can't watch that. I get flashbacks from when I broke my front teeth. No thank you. But we also have X-Babies. That's right, so Mojo went ahead and did the X-Men dirty. So in the X-Men Annual Issue 10, Mojo is inspired by Muppet Babies and thinks, you know what would be pretty cool? X-Men babies. And it was pretty cool. This issue was released in 1986 and was the issue that introduced Longshot, actually. I like Baby Wolverine. He still rocks the claws and he's a badass, but he's like a cute badass. He has the hair. It's amazing. If I have a kid, I'm gonna dress him up like Wolverine and hopefully he doesn't talk the same. I don't know. They say golly gumbucks in the issue quite a bit, and now I'm gonna start saying golly gumbucks all the time. If you could see any X-Men as a baby in live action, which one would you pick? Comment down below so we can chat about it next video.
Number 2, Professor X gets sent weird honeymoon pictures. This is more of a moment that happened in the story Hell Hath No Fury as opposed to the whole story itself being weird. But the moment is so weird, it just needs to be touched on. At the beginning of the comic, we see Professor X reminiscing on the first of his students and also the first to join his X-Men team, pupil Scott Summers. Cyclops has recently left the team to settle down with his now new wife, Madeline Pryor, who looks exactly like Jean Grey. Scott had considered that she might actually be the reincarnation of Jean, but we later find out that she was actually Jean's clone created by Mr. Sinister. Professor X is reading a letter he's received from Scott detailing the events of his newlywed life and includes a picture of Scott and Maddie in bed together. Not only is that a weird thing to send your teacher slash father figure, but it's also weird in the sense that it makes you wonder who was taking this picture. Scott and Maddie also appear to possibly be both naked while in bed as well, so there's that.
And finally, number 1. Dracula? This time of the year is my favorite. The smell of leaves, decaying, lots of chocolate, and people that look like Dracula. I don't know, sign me up. Halloween always slaps. Now, I figured it was only fitting to end this wacky list with Dracula himself making an appearance in the X-Men universe. We go now to X-Men Apocalypse vs. Dracula, which made its debut back in 2006. The series is quite cool, but of course it takes place in 1459, so right off the bat, pun intended, you're drawn into this medieval artwork and you see Vlad the Impaler just murking people like left and right. It's kind of like the Battle of the Bastards episode from Game of Thrones. Just a lot of metal clashing. Any movie with metal clashing, I'm in, sign me up. I love this kind of theme, the dark and spooky, like let's go. With Mahershala Ali signed on to play Blade in the MCU, I don't think we're that far out from seeing Dracula fight some Avengers. Jared Leto and Morbius as well. I think we got some bloodsuckers in the pipeline.
Number 10. The Reaching Hand. The amount of bizarre deaths Jimmy Olsen has to suffer in alternate realities, my goodness. In this story featured in the Elseworlds 80-page giant from 1999, we see Bruce Wayne acting as a Lovecraftian detective aiming to unravel the mystery that is the alleged murder of Elongated Man. In reality, something far more dark and sinister has taken hold of the hero and is using him as its vessel to spread darkness throughout the city and take hold of other innocent souls. It reminds me a bit of the bizarre and campy 90s film Cast a Deadly Spell. Like most Lovecraft-inspired horror stories, this one ends with a foreboding cliffhanger. That face. I love that face. Bruce Wayne's face at the end, he's like, oh, what will happen? You're dead. You're gonna die. It's not gonna be good. Number 9. Teen Titans The Lost Annual. This strange story has a campy 60s feel to it. It was originally slated to be released in the early 2000s as an Elseworlds special for Teen Titans, but was later delayed. In the end, it was released in 2008, where it would be referred to in the title as a Lost Annual. But originally, it was intended to be an Elseworlds special, so I'm gonna count it. Here, the Teen Titans team up to try and save President John F. Kennedy, who has been kidnapped by space aliens and replaced by some kind of double. The whole adventure is pretty wacky, which honestly is what makes it so enjoyable. You know me, I love wacky adventures. Reminds me a bit of an original series Star Trek episode. And in case you haven't gathered by now, TOS is my favorite of the Star Treks, so yes. Although I am finally watching Discovery now, so I guess we'll see what happens. And before we move on to our number 8 spot, a quick thank you to all of you for joining me this list, and a reminder to click that like if you want more videos like this one. I personally love exploring Elseworlds with you, so I'd love to do more about it. Number 8. Elseworld's Finest, Supergirl and Batgirl. This one is kinda ridiculous, but also has some pretty powerful and epic moments. In this Elseworlds story, both Superman and Batman do not exist. Kal-El was destroyed before he could become Superman, though Kara Zor-El still made it to Earth. She took his place as Metropolis's hero, becoming Supergirl. Bruce Wayne never became Batman either, and instead Barbara Gordon guards Gotham as Batgirl, after her parents were murdered by accident instead of the Waynes, who were meant to be targeted. The two women join forces and take on a very sneaky Lex Luthor, who Supergirl had thought of as a close friend and ally initially, and a very jacked Joker. He's like really jacked, like more jacked than you could probably imagine. He's also wearing like a little gym outfit, which is just something. Number 7. A Nation Divided. This Elseworld comic, Superman: A Nation Divided, gives us a look at what Superman would be like if he was around during the Civil War and happened to be a Union soldier. In this story, Superman is known as Atticus Kent and ends up finding out he has superpowers during the Civil War. He quickly becomes the Union's new secret weapon and even takes both Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln on a little flight to give them a tour of the Capitol. I personally love when history and comics meld, and Elseworld stories that posit what if superheroes were real and part of historical events. So for me, this was an interesting story and one that I enjoyed. The whole story is told through letters of various historical figures as well as Kent himself. Number 6. Thrill Killer. Set in the 60s, this Elseworld stories follows a doomed Barbara Gordon and Dick Grayson, aka Richard Grey Stark, which is his actual name here. Although he still goes by Dick Grayson because comics. These two attempt to take on the Joker, who in this world is a woman known as Bianca Steeplechase. In the end, Robin is killed, but so seemingly is the Joker. Oddly enough, in this reality, it's actually Batwoman and Robin who end up inspiring Bruce Wayne to join them. He becomes Batman after Dick's demise. Barbara is also the one with the wealth in this Elseworld story. She is an heiress who became somewhat estranged from her father after the unsolvable murder of her mother. Barbara uses her wealth to purchase Wayne Manor, as in this reality, the Waynes actually lost their fortune during the Great Depression. Very period of them. Very period to lose all of your money during the Great Depression. Or now, during the Now Depression. Number 5. Red Rain. Red Rain has to be one of my all-time favorite Elseworlds tales. It also was an ongoing story that was told over the course of multiple graphic novels released throughout the 90s. In this story, Batman battles vampires but eventually succumbs to them when he is bitten and transformed himself into one of the creatures of the night. He still battles with his new monstrous nature, however, attempting to rebel against it. However, eventually the Joker pushes him too far, causing him to give into temptation and drink his foe's blood. I also like how this is rebel. This is like, get off my lawn, kids. I don't know why I do this when I say rebel. Batman attempts to make sure the Joker will never rise again as a vampire, but eventually it is revealed that he was somehow unsuccessful in preventing this from happening when we revisit this alternate Earth much later down the road. Fans of vampires are sure to also enjoy this world, but as a Batman fan, I also just love the extra layer of moral struggle that vampirism gives Batman. Number 4. Earth 3. Earth 3 is home to the Crime Syndicate, an alternate reality where instead of the Justice League members being heroes, they're villains, and instead of the Justice League, we have the Crime Syndicate. In the place of Wonder Woman on the team, we have Superwoman, an evil version of Lois Lane armed with her lasso of submission. Although I always like to think of it as a whip of submission, but that's not. That's something else. You guys can cut that. That might be too kinky. I don't know. I don't know if it's too kinky. You tell me. Internet, you tell me. The heroes of this alternate Earth favor strength above all, and as such only seek to dominate and rule those who they consider to be weaker than them. The Crime Syndicate themselves are composed of members Deathstorm, Owlman, Superwoman, and Ultraman currently, but evil versions of Aquaman, known on this alternate Earth as Sea King, and the Flash, known here as Johnny Quick, were also part of the team at a time. I miss Johnny Quick. R.I.P. Johnny Quick. You dead. Number 3. Elseworld's Finest. I mostly love this story for the art, to be honest. Elseworld's Finest is quite different from the previous story we had with no Superman or Batman, with Supergirl and Batgirl respectively taking their place. This title of this story and two-part limited series was initially based on the old comic series World's Finest, which featured the two heroes of Superman and Batman teaming up on the regular. Basically, it's their long-lasting BFF comic. In Elseworld's Finest, we see the heroes team up to go on an Indiana Jones style adventure, with Bruce rocking some pretty sweet supernatural and mystical armor. The two must work together to face an evil Russian Lex and defeat the villainous Ra's al Ghul in order to save the world and free Lana Lang's father. Number 2. Red Sun. One of the most intriguing Elseworlds when it comes to Superman, and in my opinion Lex Luthor for any Lex fans out there, is Red Sun. Red Sun comes to us from the Elseworlds imprint and aims to answer the question, what if Superman had been raised in the Soviet Union? The result is we get a passionate communist Superman who, instead of standing for truth, justice, and the American way, stands for socialism, Stalin, and acts as a champion of the common worker. Instead of an S on his chest, he wears the symbol of communism, the hammer and sickle. Red Sun was a story written by Mark Miller, which offered us a different look at Lex Luthor as well, who became the president and sort of the hero of the USA, all as a part of his greater plan to satiate his obsession with destroying Superman. So in a weird way, Lex becomes sort of part hero as well as the recognizable part paranoid villain that we've all come to know and love. Number 1. Earth 1. Also known as Earth 1 with the number instead of the letters, so Earth 1 or Earth 1. But it's also confusing because there's multiple Earth 1s. When it comes to some of the DC multiverse, it can actually just get a little confusing in general, as of course there are various Earths that have the same number depending on the continuity we're talking about, New Earth or Prime Earth, not to be confused as well with Earth Prime. Yeah, it can get pretty mathy up in your brain if you're trying to keep track of everything and separate it. But this time around, when I'm talking about alternate Earths when it comes to the number 1, I'm talking about Earth 1, where all of our heroes are just starting out as seen in the Earth 1 series, like Batman Earth 1, Superman Earth 1, Wonder Woman Earth 1. You get the idea. There's a lot of Earth ones. I like how I didn't talk about how it was interesting at all, I just talked about how it was confusing. Anyways, if you've read Earth 1 or any of those series, you know what I'm talking about. It's awesome. Enough said, apparently. Number 10. What if Captain America hadn't vanished during World War II? Captain America did vanish during World War II in the main continuity, but there is another important plot point in this story that we've seen happen more than once in comics, and that is Bucky Barnes taking over as Captain America. While Bucky was believed dead for years in the comics, he eventually returned in the early 2000s as the Winter Soldier, and it was revealed while being suspected as deceased after falling from a plane and being reported MIA that he had actually survived all these years. We've seen him take over and become Captain America both during the House of M event and in the main continuity during Brubaker's run of Captain America in 2008. And he also died as Captain America in the main continuity as well. So that's pretty interesting. Or we thought he died. Who knows if that would have been the truth in the What If story if it had continued. Number 9. What if Iron Man had been a traitor? It might have not gone down the same way as it did in the What If, but a version of this story did end up becoming true in the Bizarre Crossing event in the mid-90s. Here it was revealed that Iron Man was actually a traitor, though this time around a less innocent one. It was revealed he had been made Kang's sleeper agent and was working in league with the villain. In the end, traitorous Tony Stark died, and a younger version of himself, still good since he had been taken from a point in his timeline before Iron Man had been influenced by Kang, took his place. In the What If special, he instead becomes a traitor working for China against his nation and his fellow teammates and friends. Fortunately, Iron Man is rescued from being used as a pawn by Mr. Fantastic of the Fantastic Four, who received his message requesting help. So he wasn't as traitorous in that story as he was in the main continuity. Number 8. What if this was the Fantastic Four? This was a story told as part of the Hero Initiative. Mike Wieringo had been working on the What If story before he suddenly passed away and had completed 7 pages of it. As such, the release date for the story was pushed back and it was utilized as a tribute for the amazing artist. The story is kind of an interesting special case where the What If was actually inspired by a true story that came before it from the main continuity, between issues 347 to 349 of the Fantastic Four series. The alternate team comprised of the Hulk as Joe Fixit, Spider-Man, Wolverine, and Danny Ketch as Ghost Rider stepped in to replace the Fantastic Four after they were tricked into believing most of the original team had actually perished by a Skrull who was posing as the Invisible Woman. I think it was Delilah. I think that's how we still say her name, it's like D apostrophe. Delilah? Yeah, I think so. This team was brought back a few more times in the comics and eventually became known as the go-to FF substitute team and team members, and are still referred to as such in comics today. This 2008 What If series imagined an alternate retelling where the team simply remained as the only FF left after the Skrull who had tricked them killed the original team members instead of simply incapacitating them. Wieringo was also misinformed during the creation of the What If and instead drew Johnny Blaze as Ghost Rider instead of Danny Ketch as Ghost Rider. Although this was going to be corrected before the book was published, because of his passing, Marvel decided to leave the art as it was, as opposed to altering Mike's art after his passing. Which I kind of agree with that decision, because I feel like that would have been really distasteful to his memory to change it. So instead we get Johnny Blaze, but other than that, this is a crew that's already happened in the comics. Number 7. What if Punisher's family hadn't been killed? Though of course in this story the Punisher's family is still killed, because yeah, it's kind of hard for Frank Castle to even become any version of the Punisher otherwise. However, instead of him being inspired to take up arms after his family gets caught in the crossfire of a mob hit and killed, they survive that fateful day, all because it rained on their picnic. Whew, that's some lucky rain. Frank becomes inspired to join the force and become a police officer. However, when offered a bribe, he reports the incident to his captain, hoping to book the crooks who are paying off the cops to look the other way. In the end, it's revealed that even his captain is part of this scheme, and he and his family are still targeted, but this time by some dirty cops. He survives, however, and becomes the Punisher. While this story does not make its way into the main continuity of Earth 616, this was basically verbatim the backstory used for the Ultimate Punisher from the kind of main continuity adjacent Earth of 1610. After all, there was a time when Ultimate was so big it was like basically an alternate main continuity. Number 6. What if Jessica Jones had joined the Avengers? Not surprisingly, this story was written by Brian Michael Bendis. In the What If, we get to see a hypothetical world where Jessica Jones is offered a spot on the Avengers shortly after she attacked them after being mind-controlled by the Purple Man, Kilgrave. Here, she joins the team and ends up marrying Captain America. In reality, aka the main continuity, Jessica Jones would end up joining the new Avengers alongside her husband on her 616, Luke Cage, 6 years later in terms of the comic's release date, joining up with the team in 2010's New Avengers run in issue number 1. Can you guess who the writer was for that issue? Yep, Brian Michael Bendis. Brian Michael Bendis' New Avengers. I like that though. I like Jessica Jones on the Avengers. I think that's cool. Number 5. What if General Ross had become the Hulk? This story came out only a few years before General Ross became the villain and beast known as Red Hulk. Although this story isn't quite as close to the original as our previous point. The What If story was written by Peter Davis, while the issue where Ross takes up the mantle of Red Hulk happens in an issue of Hulk written by Jeff Loeb. So we've got 2 different writers for this one as opposed to them both being the same person. And a dark twist, General Ross in the What If issue ends up becoming the Hulk in the place of Bruce Banner. He becomes a rage-fueled monster who has to be put down by Bruce himself after he kills his own daughter Betty by accident when he tosses a tank which lands, crushing her. Devastating. Number 4. What if Spider-Man joined the Fantastic Four? This one takes a different direction but arrives at the same goal. In the What If story, Spider-Man, instead of being turned away by the FF on their first meeting with him when he attempts to join up, offers to hear him out. Sue convinces her team to listen to Spider-Man, and they eventually decide that he can join their team, becoming the Fantastic Five instead of the Fantastic Four. All 5s on their chest. In the end, Sue ends up leaving the team with Spider-Man feeling that him showing her up was what caused her to leave. Wow, big ego much, Spider-Man? She ends up choosing to leave the FF and be with Namor, and he transforms her into an Atlantean, intending for Sue to become his queen. In the main continuity, Spider-Man joins the new version of the FF at the time, known as the Future Foundation, instead after the other Storm sibling has left. Johnny Storm was thought to be dead at that time, and so Spider-Man basically fills in his spot on the Fantastic Four team. To this day, Spider-Man is still considered to be on the extended roster to fill in as a substitute member when needed. Number 3. What if the Hulk had the brain of Bruce Banner? Well, this one might not line up exactly either. You'll definitely see similarities when it comes to the premise. In this story, we get to see what would happen if the Hulk ended up being as level-headed and intelligent as Bruce Banner. Sound familiar? Later on in 1991, we get our first look at a version of the Hulk that was Bruce Banner, the Grey Hulk persona, and the Green Hulk persona merged, leading us down a road to what we'd later come to know as Professor Hulk. Of course, in the What If, we also saw a new being named X-Man come into being when Mr. Fantastic, Professor X, and Intelligent Hulk merged in an attempt to defeat Galactus. And I don't think we've seen that part come true just yet. Number 2. What if Jane Foster had found the Hammer of Thor? In this issue, we see what would happen if Jane Foster were the one to find and retrieve Thor's hammer, being deemed worthy by the weapon to wield it. She takes up the name Thordis in this issue and ends up fighting Loki. Upon meeting Odin, even in her Thordis form, he still does not like Jane, seeing her as an imposter, a Valkyrie in Thor's raiment. In the end, Odin gets over his distaste of Thordis and Jane Foster after she helps him to avert Ragnarok. He does make her give the hammer back to Thor, who is currently Donald Blake, but as a reward he also makes her an Asgardian goddess. Not a bad trade. In the main continuity, Jane became Lady Thor after Thor was deemed not worthy and the hammer called to her. Number 1. What if Thor was the Herald of Galactus? This one recently came true in Donny Cates' current run on Thor. Thor and Galactus teamed up initially to take on the universal threat that was the Black Winter. However, this idea was initially explored by Robert Kirkman more than 10 years earlier in the 2005 What If Thor. In this What If story, Thor becomes the Herald of Galactus and instead teams up with him to take on Loki, who has conquered Asgard and killed Odin after initially agreeing to become Galactus' herald to save Asgard from his hunger. Thor instead decides to let Galactus devour Asgard now that it is in ruins, and Loki rules it, first allowing his friends and fellow Asgardians who survived Loki's initial assault to escape to Midgard. Then he murders a bunch of frost giants and lets Galactus have his fill.
Kicking off the list at number 10, the death of Anthony Stark. Yeah, the front page looks like that. Now imagine if that was the poster for Endgame. Oh god, so many tears. So many more tears, rather. Heyo. This issue is wild. It shows all these superheroes mourning the loss of their friend and fellow Avenger. Even Dr. Doom's mourning. He does like a toast. He's a villain. What's going on? He's like, yes, let us drink now to the memory of a worthy opponent. And to make things even crazier, he writes a note to Rhodey that says, this key card will give you full access to the entire complex. Take this CD to my office, play it on the AV system, boom. The guy's carrying around super suits in briefcases, but he gives Rhodey a compact disc. Gotta love the time. So he puts it in and clicks play, and it's so sad. It shows Stark explaining that somebody has to continue after him. And then bam, you see a suit made just for Rhodey. What a moment. Tony continues to say that Iron Man was the greatest thing he's ever invented, and he doesn't want it to die with him. What a message. So moving. I'm touched, personally. It's overwhelming for Rhodey. I mean, of course, all this newfound responsibility of being Iron Man, plus, mourning your best friend. Ayo, that's a tough one. What a week. So finally, he suits up, and it's so badass. Tony Stark may be dead, but Iron Man lives again. So lovely. And the best part, turns out Tony wasn't actually dead at all. Rather just under cryogenic stasis until a scientist sorted out his back problems. Yeah, psych, gotcha, made you look. And before we go on to number 9, guys, if you could please go ahead and toss us a thumbs up for this video because it helps us out here quite a bit. You guys are the best. All right, now back to Zombie Tony Stark. Number 9, Zombie Time. Marvel's Zombie is amazing. I mean, it's absolutely disgusting and terrifying, but amazing nonetheless. So Marvel Zombies is a 5-part series written by Robert Kirkman, and it doesn't hold back. I mean, right off the hop, we see Spider-Man with his leg just like messed up. He's like eating people. It's gross. It's kind of like these heroes in a way you don't want to see them, but you kind of do want to see them. It's gross, I don't know. And then we also see Captain America with the top of his head just sliced off, just boop, gone. Everybody's like, hey Cap, you know your brains are hanging out of your head. And then he grabs some brain tissue and says, nope, not all of them. And then in comes Tony Stark. He goes detective mode, right? He's like, whoa, 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 whoa. So you're telling me there's no Magneto left? He just burned away? Banner is only Banner after he eats, and Spider-Man's all emotional like he just had some yum-yums. You didn't save any for me. Interesting. It's a really wild way to see Tony's leadership, especially considering the context. He's like, give me your face now, I want to eat it.
I'm sure the Green Goblin can afford some more bacon.
Dude, this supposed to last us till we get rescued.
Number 8, Iron Man and Titanium Man. All the metals, all the men, bam, explosions. In Tales of Suspense issue 69, we see another metal guy. This time, he's green. Like that, it's green. You can't see, but it's green. There we are, now it's green. Titanium Man, how exciting. They make this big event, right, to watch the two smash heads. It's like a UFC fight, but with monologues and narrating every single fight move you're gonna make. If you skip this issue, that's fine, you're not missing out. There's a guy in a suit who thinks he's better, and he's actually slower and way more stupid. Yep, there it is. He wants all the eyes and ears on him, of course, he likes attention, but when it comes to brass tacks, you don't stand a chance, Boris Bulsky. More like Boris Bulsh. Number 7, Superior Iron Man. This is a fun one, but still a little out of character from the Tony that most of us know. So the issue itself starts off pretty neat, okay? It kind of mirrors the tech that he has in his latest films. He can control his suit, fly in it, fly around, high-five babies, all that cool stuff, all while laying in a pool sipping on drinks. Yeah, his new Extremis armor was fascinating. So much so that Tony released it as a smartphone app. Yeah, imagine having that at the bottom. You got messages, Instagram, some Extremis, and then Angry Birds too. You know, all the essentials for sure. So this app allowed people to change their bodies using this virus, becoming however they wanted. What a dream come true. And then Tony does the ultimate move and says the app is actually just a free trial. Yeah, if you want to continue it, you gotta pay $100 a day. Honestly, it's not bad. I mean, dudes are out here buying PlayStation 5s for like $3 grand. That's not a bad price for some Tony tech. I'll just get my buddy Matt from grade 10 to jailbreak my phone again, just like the old days. We're good. Number 6, Demon in a Bottle. Now sure, Tony's struggling with addictions isn't weird per se, but it is a plot device that we're not gonna see in future MCU movies. I mean, we saw a little glimpse of it in Iron Man 2, but not too much, of course, because kids are like, why is he dying? Why is he drinking things? What's going on? So this character arc begins in Iron Man issue 120, and it lasts about 9 issues. At first, we see Tony, and he's just slamming drinks like it's prom night, all right? The opening shot, we see like 3 mini bottles of gin, And then Tony orders more. So the flight attendant's like, hey, how about a magazine to read? And Tony's like, hey, how about another martini? And she even tries to cut him off, but he insists that he's drinking for two. The other, of course, being his Iron Man persona. Always a healthy sign. Oh, me, I'm drinking for myself and also this H&M sweater, so I need two, thank you. What happens when you have a superhero who loves slamming martinis? Well, you get Tony Stark flying through the air, drunk, spreading toxic fumes all over a crowd. He's kind of like Hancock in a way, just dangerous. Funny, but dangerous. The alcohol addiction was of course put to the side with the MCU story, thank God. That would take us out of the movie, I think, just a little bit. Like if Tony snapped his fingers and then like a bottle of gin appeared and he's like, perfect. Number 5, Ultimates 3. So since Iron Man 2, we're talking about it a little bit, we saw the relationship between Black Widow and Tony get stronger, and they get really close, but not Ultimates 3 close, heh. So the 2008 5-parter opens up with this shot. All the Ultimates just hanging out in Tony's mansion, and then in the background there's a tape playing. This tape being Black Widow and Tony Stark doing the thing. Check it out. The issue itself is titled Sex, Lies, and DVDs. Not even Blu-ray either, just DVDs. So what's the deal? Why does this exist? Well, in the Ultimates 2, her and Iron Man dated and of course got engaged, but it's all a lie. A sham. She was trying to destroy the Avengers for the fall of the Soviet Union. That is, until she's killed by Hawkeye. So after she's dead, the tape gets released. People are selling DVDs of it on the streets of New York. It's kind of like in Luke Cage where people are selling footage of the incident, but imagine if they were selling that incident. Some of these stories just need to stay in pages, I think. Number 4, the new Iron Man. The Invincible Iron Man issue 21 had a pretty eye-opening front page illustration. It's Tony Stark quitting. The front page even says, no, this is not a nightmare. So he decides that flying around in a super suit just doesn't blend well with the old ticker, right? He's got heart problems going on. So he looks at somebody else to take on the mantle of Iron Man. So who does he go to besides Eddie March, the famous fighter with brain trauma and damage? Awesome. So he suits up and he loves it, of course. I mean, he's adding clips, he's boxing people, he's making it his own, you know? He's just having a good time. And then Crimson Dynamo ruins that and Tony is forced to return to the tin. I'm surprised he didn't ask Mike Tyson. I mean, his name is already Iron Mike Tyson. Number 3, Convention of Fear. If you're watching this video right now or you're part of our over 1 million subscribers, confetti, odds are you ventured around a comic book convention or two. So in Iron Man issue 72, titled Convention of Fear, it shows our man in a can getting the job done and taking out low-level villains like Man-Bull, Whiplash, the Melter, all in the home of a comic convention. And of course the battle comes to an awesome end with fans hailing Iron Man, like real fans too, at this convention. I mean, New York is a pretty common battle place, but a fan convention, I don't know, might be a little bit too meta. Number 2, Iron Man Otar. I mean, it doesn't get much weirder than this. We got Tony Stark squaring up against a Minotaur, and the other plot going on is this weird love triangle with Jasper Sitwell and then Whitney Frost. So the whole time you're kind of raising an eyebrow. The issue as a whole is odd. He doesn't even do well against the Minotaur. Like, this dude struggles to fight the Minotaur. Then in the last second, Miklos the Minotaur has a change of heart and helps Iron Man save Whitney. Ah, it's great, super thrilling. We love happy endings, I guess. We love to see characters lose control and then immediately gain control only moments later. That's my secret, Cap. I'm always a Minotaur in control.
Sorry boys, momentary loss of motor nerve.
And finally, number 1, Trapped by the Red Barbarian. Remember that part in Winter Soldier where Natasha Romanoff has that amazing face-changing technology that for sure could have come in handy for literally any other movie? Well, in Tales of Suspense issue 42, we see a drawn-out version of that idea with the actor. The actor is an interesting lad. He can resemble almost anybody, and in his words, he says, with the aid of a little makeup. Ah yes, changing your entire appearance? Haha, just dab some eyeshadow on. That should do it, says the actor. So the actor steals some tech from Stark because, well, of course he does. And then Tony makes the Red Army believe that he's the actor because they look the same, and then he steals it back. Then the real actor gets killed because they don't believe that the real actor is... Does your brain hurt? My brain kind of hurts. Cool, let's just end it there. Number 10. What if... But don't worry, Mr. President can handle it himself, being Captain America and all. We see the return of Red Skull in this story as well, and in typical Steve Rogers fashion, we of course have to look into what if Captain America was revived today, written again by Peter B. Gillen.
Carnage Cosmic is a version of Carnage where he is bonded to none other than the Silver Surfer. During the first appearance of this hypothetical monstrosity, Carnage simply used Silver Surfer as a mode of transportation to get back to his beloved host, Cletus Cassidy. However, in issue 108 of What If Volume 2 in the 1989 series, we examine what would happen if the villain became more of a greater threat. It takes all of the Avengers to even stand a chance against him, and even then they are overwhelmed. In the end, Silver Surfer is forced to fly into the sun to get rid of this stubborn and deadly symbiote, which also means he has to fight for control all the while. Number 9. What if Rick Jones became the Hulk? Okay, so admittedly this story is more silly than scary, but if you actually think through everything Rick Jones goes through here and the fate of Hulk at the end of the story, it can be seen as, well, being pretty scary. Also, I just really like it. Like Annihilus' voice and demeanor, it's both a scary and raunchy story. Yeah, you heard me right, raunchy. Don't ask me, Rick is the one that mentions Annihilus' raunchiness in this issue. Here we see Rick not only become the big green Goliath, but we also watch as he finds himself bonded with Captain Marvel as well, sharing a body with him. So, just a lot going on all at once in my opinion. You'd think we'd swap his Marvel Negaband story for the Hulk one, but no, we're not going to do that. In this reality, both happen. In the end, Mr. Fantastic and a normal Bruce Banner end up helping Rick return to normal, but Hulk remains trapped in the Negazone with Annihilus, so they kind of get like separated. He makes quick work of the villain while in the Negazone, then remains stuck there for forever? He doesn't seem to mind at the end of the story, but I feel like if we checked back on him in a few months, he wouldn't be quite as happy. Seems like a strangely happy spin on what should be a pretty dark ending. I also just like how everyone after is like, it turned out great for everyone, or for most of us. What? How's Hulk? And Rick's just like, I'm sure he's fine. Cut to Hulk having the best time. And before we move on to our number 8 spot, just a quick reminder, if you're enjoying this list and lists like this, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. It really does help us out here at the channel. Number 8. What if John Jameson had become the Amazing Spider-Man? This one is more sad than it is scary, but it has a pretty tragic ending, so I still felt it was appropriate enough to include it here. In the final story included in this What If issue, we learn of an alternate reality where John Jameson ends up becoming Spider-Man, or Spider Jameson. Instead of being reviled by J. Jonah Jameson, his father, he's completely supported by JJ, because yeah, that's his son, and Jameson Sr. knows that he's, you know, Spider-Man. Jameson even designs John's spider suit here. However, in the end, John dies while attempting to help with the same mission that 616 Peter Parker Spider-Man ended up saving him from, leaving his father heartbroken. What a tragic ending. Died the same way he died sort of in 616, but different circumstances? Number 7. What if the Avengers had never been? This issue ends pretty darkly in a reality where we explore the future of the Avengers who did not stay banded together after Hulk left. Instead of going to search for Hulk together, Thor has the revelation that Hulk should be allowed to leave if he would like, as, you know, none of the Avengers have taken an oath to remain loyal forever or any such thing. Iron Man then calls Thor out for only thinking this way because he too is planning on leaving. Stark obviously has some, like, abandonment issues, I feel like. Thor doesn't take kindly to this retort and does leave, and so do Hank and Janet, currently known here as Giant Man and the Wasp. In the end, Hulk teams up with Namor, and Iron Man is forced to face them solo styles after trying a few times to get the team back together. Eventually, Giant Man and the Wasp do end up showing up to help Iron Man out, but sadly, it ends up being too late. During the fray, Iron Man is badly injured, and while the heroes win the day in the end, their victory comes at the cost of Iron Man's life. How tragic. How dark. Death. Number 6. Public Enemy number 1. This story comes at us from the line of What If stories we got in 2006. It tells the tale of James Howlett, Logan, Wolverine, who ends up teaming up with Matteo DiPergio in Chicago to defeat criminal and mob boss Scarface. Here, Logan becomes a version of, I guess, the Skull, the man responsible for killing Scarface, but he also becomes something else. He wears a flag on his chest that shows the Jolly Roger and this skull and crossbones symbol, as well as the backstory of his family, who were burnt to a crisp, are meant to also make him another feared vigilante character well known in the Marvel Universe as the Punisher. And when I say his family was burnt to a crisp, I mean like killed, burnt to a crisp, not like they got a bad sunburn, just so you know. This is a dark and gritty tale that also gives us a pretty awesome historical atmosphere, as well as an overall gangster story tone that's quite dark and draws you in. It's both scary and intriguing, which is how I like anything that's scary personally. I'm like, this is scary, but it makes me think, which I like. Number 5, what if Prince Namor of Atlantis grew up on land? This story's title doesn't inherently make it sound scary, and yet. Namor here, instead of siding with his own people of Atlantis and that heritage, decides to align himself with land dwellers, turning his back on the sea. He still fought in World War II, but during that time lost his friend, the android known as the Human Torch, or Jim Hammond. So, not Johnny Storm, different Human Torch. Immortalized as a hero, the Human Torch's memory lives on. But so too, does it seem, did he. 30 years later, the government gets a signal, which they think is from the Human Torch, calling out, repeating the same word he was saying on repeat when he went missing. Namor. Namor is sent in to investigate and finds his people have been enslaved by a race of half-human and half-Atlantean people who it turns out are still allied with Germany and the Axis, despite the war being long over. They plan on using the Human Torch under the sea to create a huge and damaging explosion. Namor prevents their plans, but is then ordered to destroy Atlantis, despite the fact that those enslaved are trying to fight back. In the end, he refuses to harm his own people, but the government doesn't care and they blow them up anyways, leaving Namor to once again live up to the meaning of his name, Avenging Sun. They also thought they killed Namor, but they didn't. Namor's not that easy to kill. Number 4. What if the Marvel superheroes had lost Atlantis attacks? Yes, what if? Atlantis attacks is such a weird story. Well, the world would basically be ruled by snake people is the answer, and yeah, that's what happens here. Here, Set is not prevented from arriving and being released upon the world. Once the Elder God does arrive, he sets to work raising the planet and turning everyone into his snake people, including some of our favorite heroes. In the end, only a handful of heroes and villains are left to set everything right, and even they fail. Quasar does manage in the end to defeat Set, but the world is still left covered in giant snakes and snake people with no foreseeable way to fix it, and many of our favorite heroes and villains are left either transformed into snake people or dead. Pretty scary. Number 3, what if the Avengers had become the pawns of Korvac? In this reality, we examined what would happen had Korvac been successful in defeating Earth's mightiest heroes, the Avengers, and succeeded in standing up against all who opposed him because of the constant love of a woman. You can do anything if you have the love of a good person, apparently. In the end, Michael Korvac brings some of the heroes back to life to serve him as he goes up against even mightier enemies. Armed with the ultimate nullifier at the end, however, Korvac uses it to bring ultimate order to all things, which actually results in everything being destroyed in that reality, including the entire reality itself. So I guess bringing order means killing everything? I guess you can't have disorder if there's nothing. Number 2, Kingdom of Cain. This What If story comes to us from issue 94 of Volume 2, the 1989 What If series. Here we see the Juggernaut roams the post-apocalyptic landscape of the Earth completely alone, the sole survivor after a disastrous Sentinel attack which decimated the Earth's heroes and the Earth itself by leaking radiation poisoning all over the place. Juggernaut seems to be the only one capable of living in this place, and he becomes almost driven mad by the loneliness, because he's the only one. Until he discovers that not everyone is dead, but actually some people have survived and are living in safety in an underground bunker. This discovery comes after he runs into Magneto, who tells Juggernaut that he knows for certain, having peered into alternate timelines, that this is all his fault, and that everyone that was killed all happened because he himself killed Charles Xavier, his stepbrother. When Cain finds the rest of the mutants who have survived, he hastily breaks through into their bunker, thereby exposing them to the radiation poisoning on the Earth's surface, and ultimately kills them too, albeit by accident, which, yeah, it's really sad. He's like, I don't want to be mean, I just want to talk to someone, and they're like, we're dying now because of you, get out of here. No one wants to talk to you, Cain. Number 1, what if the Fantastic Four's second child had lived? This doesn't sound like it should be the scariest story on the list, but it definitely is. The first story in this series is just a straight up horror story where Sue ends up giving birth to a healthy baby girl, but dying herself in childbirth. And that's not even the scary part. From the beginning, the doctors warned her that her pregnancy would be difficult, and from the beginning, Franklin Richards knew something was wrong with his unborn sister. Is like the most dark, menacing face. When the baby does come into the world, who's named after her deceased mother, so I guess like Sue Jr., it's revealed that she is actually an energy-draining monster who kills those around her by feeding on their life force energy. Franklin is finally able to convince his father of this, but too late, as Reed dies in the ensuing battle, leaving Franklin all alone. Just a sad orphan. Also, yeah, he was so right. His sister's like a straight up demon monster thing. Yikes. Number 10. What if Mary Jane had been shot instead of Aunt May? This is a really epic and dark story where Peter ends up going on a rampage when Mary Jane is killed by Kingpin's hired sniper assassin instead of Aunt May. Peter manages to save Aunt May, but Mary Jane ends up dead, and as a result, Pete dons his black suit and goes after the Kingpin himself. He is met with resistance when Tony Stark as Iron Man attempts to confront him and talk sense into him. Spider-Man, however, is too far gone and is definitely not in the mood for advice from Tony Stark. This results in an epic fight between the two heroes, while Wilson Fisk's life hangs in the balance of who will win. In the end, Peter ends up getting his revenge, one-punching Fisk to death before being arrested by the authorities. He regrets ever trusting Tony Stark and ever marrying Mary Jane. As Wilson Fisk would say, this issue is so goth. Number 9. What if Spider-Man became the Punisher? This one ends up at least having a happy ending, but starts off being pretty dark and pretty scary. In this story, we imagine what life would have been like for Peter if he had become the Punisher. Instead of beating his villains and them ending up just locked away, for many, their fate is much more final. Even the Green Goblin ends up being killed by Spider-Man Punisher following the confrontation with Gwen at the bridge. Gwen, however, lives, not killed from the great height from which she was dropped. I do love how they keep drilling in that it would be the fall, not the impact, that would kill her, like in the original story, which I always thought was so bizarre. Spider-Man Punisher saves Gwen, but Green Goblin ends up dead, and Harry swears vengeance on the man who killed his father. Although this story has a dark and murderous narrative, it gives us a more happy ending, sort of. Peter chooses love instead of vengeance in the end and gives up being the Punisher, retiring from vigilante life to go be happy with Gwen. As this decision is made, however, Frank Castle loses his family and miraculously survives the shootout in Central Park, in the end becoming the Punisher in this reality as was fated. Although I do think it's really weird in that story that like Gwen living is the thing that like changes that for him. If your like girlfriend's life was threatened, wouldn't that make you more angry? Maybe not. I've never been Spider-Man, so I don't really know. Alright friends, before we move on to this next spot, just a quick reminder to click that thumbs up. It's good for your health, it's good for your heart, it's good for your brain. Number 8. What if Ord resurrected Jean Grey instead of Colossus? In this story, Jean is brought back to life at a time where it is revealed that Cassandra Nova holds influence over Emma Frost. Fearing the return of the Phoenix Force, which would join to Jean Grey once more, Emma decides to take matters into her own hands. Her own diamond hands. It's revealed that the Phoenix Force has been lurking within her cuckoo's minds, and she decides to take hold of it, killing them in the process. Tragic. She then plans on defeating Jean. The X-Men band together to face her, and S.H.I.E.L.D. and S.W.O.R.D. also conveniently join the fray. Like, we're here too. In the end, Ord, Beast, Emma, and her cuckoos and Kitty lay dead, and the Phoenix is contained, but Cassandra remains undetected, still out there waiting for the right moment to strike. Number 7. What If? The Spider Who Went Into the Cold. This story comes to us from the What If story Spider-Man vs. Wolverine, and asks the question, what if Spider-Man never came back out from the cold? This story sees Peter Parker actually kill someone while acting as Spider-Man. It was an accident. He thought the person had armor that would protect him from the hit, but it was powered down. Of course, who should be working alongside Spidey when this happens but of course Wolverine, who shows no remorse for what Spider-Man has done, jokingly suggesting that they cry about it. In the end, this event changes Peter after he and Wolverine save his friend Alex, and this causes him to become a killing machine. He receives further training, and although he still has a sense of morality, no longer has qualms with taking out the bad guys permanently. He leaves MJ and his life behind, setting out to join S.H.I.E.L.D., working on as a hired Black Ops team. Also, I love a good Spider-Man Wolverine team up because it's just not what you usually get. I love when they team up. Number 6. What if Iron Man had been a traitor? I personally think this one is pretty scary if you put yourself in Iron Man's shoes. For me, one of my biggest fears, and I think one of the most human fears out there, is just a lack of control. In Tony Stark's case, he doesn't really have any control over what he does or how he acts in this story, but is forced into being a traitor when a rival country gains control of his heart. If he refuses to do as is demanded of him, he is put through intense and unyielding chest pains and could be killed. This ends up putting him on a path to attempt to kill Reed Richards, all while leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for Reed to follow so that he might be able to figure out that Stark's actions are not his true intentions and that he is being manipulated into harming his compatriots and betraying his country. Number 5. What if the man, the monster? This is actually one of the scariest ones for me in my opinion. This story was such an intense story that we didn't even get an introduction from the watcher Yuata. Here we have a story where the roles are reversed between Bruce and the Hulk, where Bruce is the monster and the Hulk, or Starman as he's known here, is the sensitive, compassionate one. Here Bruce Banner is a colonel who marries Betty only to mistreat her after being traumatized from years of being mistreated by his own father and witnessing the cruelty his father doled out to his mother. The gamma radiation does split Banner into two beings here, transforming him into another creature with immense power, but this creature is the side of him that actually represents the compassionate side of this trauma, the side who wants to protect, not hurt, whereas Bruce Banner himself becomes the malicious monster. We hear this story from Betty's perspective, who ends up trying to speak out on the way Bruce has treated her, only to have her father not even believe her and send her back to Bruce once she's left, and to later have her confession to Doc Samson manipulated by Colonel Banner, causing her to end up getting sent to a mental institution. Also, I'm not sure what's happening in this last panel of this comic, if it's just like she doesn't know that they're about to come get her and take her away, or if she's there and she's just like, it's fine that I'm here. I'm gonna assume it's the first one, because otherwise that's a really weird way to end that story. Number 4. What if Legion had killed Xavier and Magneto? Just imagine how messed up Age of Apocalypse would be, but also you don't have to, because the story's gonna do it for you. Thank you, What If. As always, when things get this bad, we have Nate to save the day. Nate Summers believes he can band together his own team of the few heroes left alive after Apocalypse's unopposed rise to take down Apocalypse and even travel back to the past to make things right. Silly Nate Summers. Instead, this only results in Captain America and Wolverine. Wolverine's hair here, by the way, is the real horror show of this story, opposing Nate's plan once it is revealed. Seeing Nate in Apocalypse's armor after Nate has defeated Apocalypse causes them to believe that Nate is trying to kind of take the place of Apocalypse and in essence become a new kind of tyrant, but a tyrant all the same. As Nate uses the Eye of Agamotto and Molecule Man to travel back in time to what he doesn't know is an alternate reality's past, Captain America, armed with Thor's hammer, sends a bolt of lightning after him that kills thousands in that past, setting in motion the apocalypse once more. Number 3. What if Danger became a bride of Ultron? I like how the title is a bride, even though in this reality Danger becomes like the ultimate bride of Ultron. A bride, as though in this reality Ultron is like multiple brides. I feel like that never works out for him, to be honest. But either way, this gives Ultron what he has always truly desired, that sweet, sweet love connection. I mean, completion, yes. Completion. That's what he's looking for. After Danger rebels against the X-Men seeking revenge basically for years of being used and trapped as their danger room with no one acknowledging her sentience, Ultron hears her calling out, senses her, and leaves his creation Victor, destroying him in order to find her. The two come together and as a wedding present, Ultron gives Danger her father, Professor X, helpless against the technology as his telepathic powers don't work on them. Ultron has him crushed and killed. The story ends with Danger and Ultron soaring off to bring havoc to the universe, flying through space on their creepy mishmashed Sentinel child. It's like a scary story, but it's also a romance story at the same time. Number 2. What if Wolverine was never deprogrammed? This is a pretty scary and gruesome one, I'm not gonna lie. Though, you know, still keeping in line with the PG-13 aspect of comics, a lot of the gore is hidden, but you can still imagine it. And when you imagine what's happening to these people here, it's pretty insane. Here we get to imagine what if Wolverine just kept on being a killing machine, brainwashed into taking out his fellow heroes, including all of those that he loved. As in many of these potential scenarios, it comes down to Wolverine and Kitty Pryde. Kitty is unable to fathom how Wolverine could be so far gone that he'd kill her, and yet after witnessing the death of everyone at his hands, including Invisible Woman, who is clawed through the bottom of her feet before getting claws right through her face, and Captain America, who gets claws right up through the bottom of his jaw through his entire head, she is forced to confront the reality that her mentor and friend Logan is really gone. Like, that's definitely going to convince you once you see that. You're like, okay, there's no hope for you. In the end, she sacrifices her hand, and it's implied her life in killing Wolverine. She phases her hand through his head, turning it solid, and then letting go as Wolverine instinctively slices off her arm, preventing his body from being unable to heal due to the hand lodged in his brain. That'll definitely prevent someone from healing. I don't even want to think about how you try to do that. How do you function with a hand in your brain? I ask you. Number 1. What if Spider-Man had rejected the spider? This is a pretty creepy, crawly, scary one. It begins with Peter Cocoon but refusing to take the spider's path home. Instead, he kills the giant spider that confronts him while in metamorphosis, remaining lost and unable to move forward, only half a being, until Venom escapes Matt Gargan and prison in order to rejoin with Peter Parker, aware that he is stuck in this stasis mode and vulnerable. Venom bonds with the Cocoon, and after months of battling with Peter inside, is eventually reborn as a new being who goes by the name Poison. Half Peter, half Venom symbiote, permanently bonded. Poison confronts Mary Jane at the Avengers Mansion, but after horrifically attacking her, Aunt May, Wolverine, and Luke Cage, and being spurned by her, disappears, resurrecting his first love, Gwen Stacy, and likely planning to turn her into his monstrous bride. Also, there's a weird thing that happens in that story where that poison basically pierces Luke Cage's skin, and then he's like, haha, even I can pierce your stone skin because I'm sharp enough, and I was like, wait, what just happened? Doesn't really make a lot of sense. But other than that, it's all pretty good, I think. Number 10. Superman Jr. is no more! Exclamation point. Remember that time that Superman Jr. quit? No? Well, you can if you read this Elseworld story. This is another Elseworld story out of the Elseworlds 80-page giant from the 90s. Seriously, this book is chock full of interesting and strange stories. In this one, Superman Jr. ends up quitting the superheroic game, much to Batman Jr.'s dismay, believing his dad will be around forever, so he's not needed. He's like, I quit, I'm over this. My dad's got this for life, for longer than life. I think you know where this is going next. Superman appears to die while taking a net full of dangerous missiles to safety in the emptiness of space to explode in. Supes Jr. then feels terrible, misses his dad, the whole world goes into a tizzy, and eventually Superman Jr. is inspired to return. I don't know if people use the word tizzy anymore, but I just did, so there you go. I'm making it a thing again. He helps Batman Jr. save some guys from an earthquake where they end up being trapped under tons of rock and snow. In the end, however, it's revealed that Superman faked his death in order to influence his son to return to his job as a hero, and everyone has a good laugh about it. Ha 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 ha! Oh, faking your death is such good fun. This story also features such amazing lines as Batguy/Bat Jr. I kid you not, he is called Batguy in this comic, asking Supes Jr., what's the true poop on this? And Superman Jr. responding with a rhyme. Rhyming on your father's grave, Superman Jr.? How distasteful. Number 9. DMT's rockumentary, The Lex Records Story. How about a story where we get the history of how Lex became the head of the most successful record label ever, representing all kinds of superheroic musician talent, and how he ended up selling the label to Darkseid. That is another story which comes to us from the Elseworld 80-page giant, and it is a delight. I promise I'm gonna have other stories that are not from this comic, but just let me get these out of the way, my friends. They're just so good. What a strange story this is. One wherein Superman is part of a superheroic Beetle-like group with Barry Allen, Green Arrow, and Aquaman. Oh, and he's the John Lennon of the group who is tragically killed. And I never knew I needed to see Martian Manhunter as a rock star, but I definitely did need that, and so do you. And before I move on to our number 8, if you are enjoying this list, be sure to let us know and show it by giving this video a thumbs up. It really does help us out here at Top 10 Nerd. Number 8. Superman/Batman. Absolute power. This comic is an interesting one. We are talking about a world in this story arc where Superman and Batman were reimagined as the only heroes. Both of their parents were wiped out at a young age, and Superman was never raised by the Kents. Instead, they were taken in and raised by Saturn Queen, Lightning Lord, and Cosmic King of the Legion of Supervillains. They created a fascist world which they collectively ruled with an iron fist, eliminating any and all opposing heroes who rose up or attempted to do so anyways. If you don't believe me, just look at the end of the first issue in this arc, which ends with Wonder Woman awakening and recruiting Uncle Sam. Yep, that's just how this story do. Number 7. Son of Superman. The 1999 Son of Superman tells a story where John Kent works alongside a group called the Supermen to discover the truth behind what really happened to his father, all as he's realizing just who his father really was, which his mom, Lois Lane, kept a secret, and as he's just realizing himself that he has superpowers. He doesn't even initially realize that Clark Kent and Superman were the same person, but initially instead suspects his mother was having an affair with the costumed hero Superman. Oh boy, John. In the end, they discovered that his father is still alive and had been kidnapped and held prisoner all these years by Lex Luthor with help from Martian Manhunter. Ooh, it does not look good on you, Martian Manhunter. It's not very nice. In the end, this plot is revealed, and despite John being new to heroics, he goes up against Lex, and the good guys end up prevailing. My favorite part, admittedly, is when John calls Lex's ponytail outdated. So 90s. Just gotta love that. Also, I just love that Lex has a ponytail in this. I also just love that this story ends with most of the older crew of Supes retiring, paving the way for a new era of supers like John himself. For me, Elseworld stories that end like this, I'm like, I wish this could be the way of DC. Just let some of these people retire. Let's get some fresh blood in here. We've got a lot of sons and daughters and such. Number 6. Batman in Darkest Night. All my Tales of the Dark multiverse fans out there are likely already familiar with this story, if not the original telling of it, then at least the dark retelling of it. You might know the version of Bruce Wayne from Earth -32, but for this multiverse story, we're talking about the version of Bruce that inspired him from the non-dark Earth, just Earth 32, no negatives needed. This version of Bruce is introduced to us in Batman in Darkest Night, a 90s comic that gave us an alternate story, one where Bruce Wayne, instead of becoming Batman, becomes the Green Lantern in Hal Jordan's place, being chosen by Abin Sur instead. In this reality, Sinestro becomes Green Lantern, Bruce Wayne's biggest foe, and the Joker never existed, as Green Lantern prevents the accident which created him at Ace Chemicals. Here, Catwoman is also Star Sapphire, which I honestly just need more artwork in my life of that whole thing. I'm just like, more Catwoman Star Sapphire artwork, please. Give it to me. Number 5. Batman / Captain America. This has got to be one of my favorite stories out there. It's the team up we've all been waiting for, Batman and Captain America together. I actually love when these two team up. Here we see them taking on each other's main nemesis, featuring Cap's Red Skull and Bat's Joker. There is also a bit of a sidekick swap where Cap partners with Robin and Batman partners with Bucky, and in the end, of course, even Joker admits that Red Skull is so evil, even he is not interested in working with him. He may be a criminal lunatic, but he is an American criminal lunatic. When it comes to German World War II soldiers, even Joker isn't interested in crossing that line. And in the end, he and Red Skull end up squaring off themselves and fighting one another as well, after Joker finds out Red Skull's true allegiance. I just love the Joker's like, I might be crazy, but like, this is too crazy for me. Not about that. Number 4. Batman / Houdini, The Devil's Workshop. For all my Gotham by Gaslight fans out there, here's another stylistically appealing Elseworld story for you. This one evokes the feel of watercolors and also has some really pretty letters. It's really pretty to look at and features Batman teaming up with Houdini to fight vampires. What more could you want, I ask you? It also gives us a cool alternate Joker with Mad Jack Schadenfreude. The art is truly so good here, I must share with you the names responsible. Howard Chaykin and John Francis Moore are the writers, with art by Mark Chiarello and letters by Ken Bruzenak. Just a stunning read. You gotta check it out. Number 3. DC The New Frontier. Not only is this a beautiful world to get lost in, it is super stylized by the late and great Darwin Cook, who passed away away in 2016. This Elseworld story paints our heroes as outlaws operating in the post-Korean War time period, where space is truly the new frontier. And being that it is, the story here is primarily led by protagonists and heroes Martian Manhunter and Hal Jordan. Also, I just gotta say, I love when Martian Manhunter gets to be like the main protagonist in a story. I feel like we don't hear enough from him usually. Maybe I just need to read more of his standalone series. Maybe that's what I need to do. The art style is simple and classic, and I also just really love the explosive use of color as well. It's a visually compelling series that I highly recommend checking out. Number 2, Earth 2. Earth 2 is home to many awesome heroes like Val-Zod, Superman, Power Girl, and Helena Wayne's Huntress. It is home to the superhero team known as the Wonders of the World, and while some of the original team is gone, we are introduced to new team members who take their place. And hey, we still got the golden oldie, Alan Scott. I personally am just a big fan of both Power Girl and Helena Wayne and their team-ups together, so Earth 2 for me, when it comes to alternate realities and worlds and their stories, has got to be one of my favorites personally. Number 1, Kingdom Come. Kingdom Come has to be one of the most beautiful Elseworld stories that takes us to an alternate future where there is a great divide and sort of war in the superhero community, following Superman's choice to retire. He does end up returning to the world of heroics at the behest of Diana, aka Wonder Woman. Kingdom Come was a story originally written by Mark Waid in response to a rise of anti-heroes in the comic world. And in the story, this is exactly what you see some of the classic heroes like Superman, Wonder Woman, and Alan Scott go up against. These new heroes whose ideologies are much more harsh and violent by comparison. Much more edgy. The artwork, of course, is done by one of the most amazing artists to this day in the biz, Alex Ross, and is all hand painted. We also get to end it with, of course, Superman and Diana becoming parents of like a cool baby, and then also they're like, hey Batman, you wanna also help us raise this super baby? I just love that. I love the three of them like parenting together. I think that's adorable.
Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Batman Gotham by Gaslight. A Tale of the Batman, written by Brian Augustin and brought to life by Mike Mignola. Comes a tale from the Victorian era where Batman is hunting down Jack the Ripper.
Your evening attire, sir.
That was not the suit I need, Alfred.
So it's 1889, and while these murders of women are happening all over the place, the general public whispers in the wind that it may be Batman who is committing these crimes. Okay, so we got historic serial murderers, we got old-timey gangs, Bruce gets framed, the candlelit mystery is afoot. I loved this one shot, honestly. It's really hard to put down as soon as you start. If you have time, at least watch the animated film because you owe it to yourself. A lot of candlelit, which way did he go? It's good, it's right up your alley, you'll love it. And before we go on to number 9, guys, if you could go ahead and toss this video a thumbs up, or else we'll be using candles to light this place up, just like Gotham by Gaslight. And we can't have that. You guys are literally the best. Thank you for your support. Number 9, The Doom That Came to Gotham. So written by the lovely Mike Mignola and Hellboy creator Richard Pace, comes a tale taking place in 1928. All these old tales, I love it. So we have Bruce Wayne after he peaced out after the death of his parents. So now, 20 years later, he's returned, and he has to get pretty dark to take out the Lovecraftian horror known as the Lurker on the Threshold. This is a 3-issue miniseries, and it's a dark, weird, fast-paced adventure. I mean, we have demons that come into the plot, like demons, so you should know what you're getting into, especially if you're a fan of Mignola's other work, Gotham by Gaslight, which I mentioned 1 second ago. Number 8, Batman I Joker. This one is a trip. Okay, so we have the Bruce, and he was dumped into a vat of chemicals way back when, and now we see the Bat as the crazy antagonist, which already is super fun. Everybody's all like, all hail the Bruce, hail the God King of Gotham. And he's quite messed up. Yeah, he's like calling out other Gotham citizens, challenging them to kill his enemies before he gets to them himself. It's wild, it's like Mad Max, crazy. And if this isn't wacky enough for you, he wants everybody to challenge him. He wants them to earn the chance to become a god by defeating him in combat. That plus some resurrected villains, it really gets the Hunger Game vibes going. So if you're into some death sport like reading, this is an ideal one-shot. Bob Hall created a quite fun story here.
I swear to God.
Swear to me!
And number 7, Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Knights in a Half Shell. Yes, just saying that out loud, I'm like, ooh, let's do it. It's comic is so fun. It's written by James Tynion IV. Right off the bat, we see a pizza delivery guy as he drops off the za. And then of course there's a note that says, leave it on the street, and then we see turtle hands creep up out of the sewer. Yep, they come across the Batmobile, and then shortly after, they come across Batman himself. It's a pretty serious take as well. I mean, I know it looks fun because you're like, Ninja Turtles, Batman, sick. Which some fans didn't like how serious it was, but others rejoiced that they could dig their teeth into something after watching the Batman vs. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles animated movie. It's a pretty slow start, but once it gets cooking, it's a hell of a lot of fun. The Turtles were transported to Gotham thanks to Krang, alongside their master, Splinter, and of course, archenemy, Shredder. They set up camp in the sewers, of course, but our own Killer Croc stumbles upon them, and then so begins this cat and mouse game with Batman and the Turtles. So Batman finds one of Raphael's sai during a fight, and then Lucius Fox confirms it is from another universe. So the 6-issue series is a pretty short read, but Freddie Williams' art will keep you admiring the pages, taking it much longer than you think. Number 6, Justice Riders. Okay, this one was released back in 1997 by Chuck Dixon, and it's a wild tale of the Wild Wild West. Justice Riders is a one-shot that has the Justice League of America take on different roles. Like Wally West is an outlaw who's blamed for the death of Barry Allen. He's like a young guy too. And then Wonder Woman is the marshal. She's the old marshal in town. The 1873 story begins with Marshal Diana Prince's hometown, Paradise. More like Paradust. Am I right, fellas? And it's destroyed by an alcoholic sorcerer named Felix Faust. So she wrangles up her super squad and hits the dirt, heading for El Inferno to get revenge. Wild West anything is a good time. There's a lot of hat tipping, we got sunsets, we got giant rocks that look like fingers coming out of the ground, and of course we got some badass gun holsters and some hate chewing. There's rules when you read this one shot though. You have to do the accent in your head the entire time, that's it. Do your worst Western accent the entire time. Number 5, JSA, Liberty File. Okay, we got some Wild West hootin' and hollerin', but what about some World War II drama? So JSL Liberty File was written by Tony Harris and Dan Jolly and sees the interception of a parcel in which the contents could change the outcome of the war. And then we got Owl, Clock, and Bat stepping in to save the day. So Jack the Grin, known as the albino smuggler, which is what my friends called me when I would steal their supplies for school, he intercepts a communicate and then hides it, and then starts making bids on it. So this is a two-parter, and it's fairly short, but it doesn't waste any time at all. The stakes are high like right off the bat. So we have these schematics for a new German long-range bomber in the hands of the Joker, right? It's dark, we got some mysterious men in bowler hats, and they're doing their mysterious men in bowler hat things, smoking and whispering in dark shadows. You already know what you're in for, it's a great time. Number 4, Batman Gotham Noir. Coming from the minds of Ed Brubaker and drawn to life by Sean Phillips comes a pulp comic thriller. A notable difference here opposed to our usual Gotham tale is that it centers around Jim Gordon this time. And he doesn't have the best luck, and he's heavy into the booze. He's a private investigator who gets framed for murder as well. So those are the 3 things you just want in life right there. Fans are actually super excited to see these themes come spiraling down to this perfect crime story. It's dark, it's gritty, and most of all, it's realistic. They made Gotham quite interesting here as well because they didn't shoot necessarily for a superhero theme, right? So Jim Gordon finds himself sharing his life story with the only person that'll listen, not God, the Bat. So now Batman already is a noir character, so I'm glad they put the focus more on Gordon here. It felt fresh. You kind of expect it to go one way, but it doesn't, and that's the best part. Number 3, Superman Speeding Bullets. From J.M. DeMatteis and Eduardo Barreto comes the ultimate question of what would have happened if Superman was discovered by the Waynes of Gotham instead of the Kansas Kents. So right off the hop, we see the usual scenario playing out. We got the alleyway, we got the mugger with the gun, and then when it comes down to the mugger shooting Bruce as well, because he cried and he just hates when kids cry, the bullets don't penetrate his skin. And his wet eyes look up at the mugger, and then those wet eyes turn bright red. Yeah, he zapped the shit out of him. Laser eyes for the win. So this Batman is now angry. It cuts to him being older, and he remembers that he could have saved his parents, and it eats him alive. That plus these Superman abilities that he now has, it makes for a very, very entertaining ride. Number 2, Flashpoint. Okay, so one of the biggest upcoming DC movies, and for good reason, the storyline where the Flash tries to go back in time to save his mother from her tragic death, which is not a bad idea at all. This story was released in 2011, written by Jeff Johns and Andy Kubert, and it starts with Barry waking up with no Flash powers. In fact, the Flash doesn't even exist. In fact, everything has changed. His mother Nora was still alive. Sick. And his father Henry died 3 years prior. Oh. Yeah, so in his own timeline, his dad's actually alive and in jail. But we know this, right? There's no Justice League, and Superman isn't even in the picture. The best part and one plot point that we're most looking forward to in the movie is that Batman in this universe is actually Thomas Wayne, Bruce Wayne's father. So Bruce ended up dying that night, causing his mother Martha to go insane, and then she becomes a Joker. That's why during the opening credits of Batman vs Superman, we were all hyped because we saw Jeffrey Dean Morgan and Lauren Cohen, two huge actors, in such a small opening scene with zero dialogue. So everyone's like, huh, that must have been an expensive day to shoot. Yeah, it was. They had bigger plans for them down the future, and now with recent news of Michael Keaton set to return in the Flashpoint movie, Jeffrey Dean Morgan took to the internet and said, Michael Keaton swooped in and took my gig. Now, I think that's super cool. Ever since Zack Snyder walked away, my whole kind of bit in that world has walked away with him. However, there's always a chat going on. There's always a chat. May I peek into this chat, sir? Because we'd love to see that. We've been kind of begging for it. I don't know. It'll be good either way. We'll see. We shall see. I mean, we'll see it June 2nd, 2022. For now, if it's not delayed even more. And finally, number 1, Justice League The Nail. If you own a car, first of all, congrats. Secondly, you must know the pain of getting a flat tire. It's always at the worst times too, right? Well, imagine if a flat tire was the sole reason Lil Kal-El was never found. Yeah, coming from the mind of Alan Davis, we see this unfold and lead the world into a much different way of living without Superman, without hope. So now Lex Luthor doesn't have anybody to go toe-to-toe with, so that led to him becoming the beloved mayor of Metropolis. The Justice League are to be feared as well. The world has a lot of hatred towards metahumans and aliens. It's great how the Silver Age heroes also kept their costumes in this as well, because they're a lot of fun in this Elseworld story. We see Alan Davis revisit big players like the Outsiders and Batman, which he drew in the 80s. So I definitely recommend adding it to the list, and that's why I put it on number 1 of our list.
Number 10, hunting season. This is the beginning of a run, let's remember. The story comes to us from the beginning of Wolverine Volume 5 from 2013, starting off in issue number 1. We start off in the middle of a massacre without really any explanation. Why are we here? What's happening? Why are there all these bones and skeletons in a mall? What's going on? Wolverine is being targeted by a villain who we later learn is named Robert Gregson. Wolverine is trying to protect his son Alex from him, as Robert has an alien blaster that can obliterate living cells. Where did this man get this alien blaster? Who gave it to him? Thankfully, Wolverine's healing factor allows him to save the day, but all the dialogue straight out of the gate is just pretty strange and weird, especially as we aren't really given any context before we jump into the situation. We're just thrown into it. Number 9, Vendetta's Echo. Really one of the weirdest things about Wolverine is all the random team-ups he's had. Why? Well, because he's just so popular of a character that everyone wants him to make an appearance in their comic to help sell those issues. Gotta sell those issues. He even made his way into the Blade comic. In issue 6 of the 2006 series, Wolverine popped up during the Superhuman Registration Act days when Blade was tasked with hunting him down. Now these two square off, but Blade ultimately doesn't end up bringing him into S.H.I.E.L.D. custody. Why? Because he remembers years ago the Wolverine actually helped him out. It's a pretty random story all in all, especially as like there is no consequences or anything, but it's fun to see Blade and Wolverine face off. And it's kind of cool to learn they had history, but also, what the heck, that's so random. Wolverine's just had history with everyone, because he's Wolverine, I guess. Before we move on to number 8, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate you being here. If you want to help us out even more, you can do so by giving this video a thumbs up and hitting that subscribe. We really appreciate it when you do. Number 8, Origin. I actually enjoyed the Wolverine origin story, especially the artwork. I didn't mind a little less mystery when it came to Wolverine in terms of learning his past with Rose and Dog and his original name of James Howlett, but what I did find strange in that story was when they decided to really drive in all the details that we felt were needed in an origin story. Like Logan's codename, Wolverine. Apparently that comes from his mining days according to his origin series. Yep. He works so hard in the mines they call him a Wolverine. What the heck does that mean? Maybe because he's like ruthless like a Wolverine? As far as I know, Wolverines aren't well known for digging or mining skills or their hard work. They're just known for killing things that are larger than them. It would be more appropriate to call him a mole, who are known for their prowess and hard work as diggers. Could you imagine if we had like Mole Man, we do have a Mole Man, he's a villain, so already taken I guess, we can't call Wolverine Mole Man. The other weird thing about this whole comment is the fact that apparently, it's a little Wolverine's code name, but Wolverine doesn't even hear this remark. He's like on a hill while these guys are talking completely far away from him, so he doesn't even hear what they say. And how would he even remember this? Doesn't his memory wipe out all of these traumatic things so he doesn't even know his past? This doesn't make any sense. So I like that we learn a lot about where he came from, but putting the origins of his codename in there just felt a bit much. Unless, like I said, Wolverines do happen to have some mining skills that I'm unaware of. If so, then I guess okay. Let me know in the comments if there's Wolverines that you know that have mining skills. Number 7. Dreams of Gore. What an aptly named story. This one is as strange as it is important. In this story we get tons of important flashbacks to a time when Wolverine got some of his memories back via unexpected flashbacks. Many of them involved his traumatic past, and as the name implies, a lot of gore. As he flashed back to these memories and became lost in them, he almost hurt the ones he loved, like Jubilee, and so he began to dig into those memories. Dig like a mole. Dig like a Wolverine. What we would end up finding was a villain who had a hook for a hand, and the epic but very 90s robo-villain, Shiva. Yes. More Shiva, please. Number 6. Tokyo Story. Okay, so this one was more of a full-on X-Men story, but I think as long as Wolverine is primarily featured alongside his fellow X-Men, we can consider it a Wolverine story too. Yeah? You with me? One of the weird parts about this issue is the random dragon they are faced with fighting, who is implied to be a paramour of Lockheed's, though is now apparently much more massive than before. I don't know. But the other strange part is that when Wolverine moves through the rubble looking for survivors after the dragon's attack on Tokyo, he smells blood and follows the scent to find a woman who shielded the blow of a collapsing building from her daughter. Sacrificing her life for her daughters, the nameless dying woman wonders who will look after her daughter when she is gone. Wolverine steps up without any hesitation or questions. Kind of a weird thing when, he's an X-Men with a lot of other responsibilities to be mindful of. He could have promised her to deliver the young girl to relatives, or simply reassured the woman that her daughter would be looked after, but now he says he'll raise her as his own. Which basically means Yukio will actually end up looking after her most of the time, as Wolverine is, busy being an X-Man most of the time, so I don't know really why he made that promise. Number 5. The Black Blade. The Black Blade is the conclusion to a story where Wolverine as Patch finds himself possessed by the influence of Muramasa's Black Blade. Having freed Jessica Drew from its influence, he himself is now possessed by a part of Muramasa's soul. It turns him into a demon-like character, and the unlikely team-up of Lindsay McCabe and Silver Samurai must work together to free Wolverine from its influence, each for their own reasons. Except that neither of them knows that Wolverine is Wolverine, because they're both fooled by his clever disguise as Patch. Even when Lindsay shoots him directly in the head and Patch recovers, saying, I got a thick skull, she's still none the wiser. She's like, sure Patch, you have a thick skull, this makes total sense. I just shot you in the head. How are you getting up? What's happening? I love this weird issue the most though, because of the crazy moment where we think Lindsay may have tortured or killed a woman, but being an actress reveals it was all a good show and clever make pretend. She even did well enough to use stage blood on her blade, which was what had me convinced, but she conveniently apparently got that from O'Donnell's makeup stores that his dancers use. Okay then. Number 4. Fatal Attractions. In the story Fatal Attractions, Wolverine lost all his adamantium and his nose to boot. This all happened when Magneto took things too far and used his powers to pull all the adamantium out of Wolverine's body. That's how I would do that if I had magnet powers. This would result in Wolverine becoming feral, and eventually he would also develop some problems with his healing factor. This would also be a big moment for Wolverine, where he would realize more clearly what his claws were really all about, and the fact that they were made of bone, not adamantium, as had been implied much earlier in the original Wolverine series. Wolverine would eventually get his nose and sanity back when his friends spent time helping him recover his humanity, but before then, it would be an interesting artistic ride, where we'd see Wolverine leave the X-Men and go out on his own for a time. Number 3. See Venice and die. I just also love the title of this story. What is the title of this story, you know what I mean? This whole story featuring LCD and Albert was just a wacky one. It's just one wacky ride. These two were basically robo-assassins who were attempting to get rid of Wolverine. LCD was an android that looked and sounded like a little girl with a little wisp. She was super cute, but super deadly, and designed to also be a bomb that could be used to basically blow Logan away. In this story, we see her upgrade her companion Albert, who appears as a cyborg Terminator version of Wolverine, before Albert uses his new smarts and modem to upgrade Elsie herself. This is what actually made Elsie decide not to follow through with her mission eventually and switch sides. Both androids receiving a heightened intelligence made them value life more and want to hold on to it a little longer. Number 2. Midgard's Final Doom. This is an alternate Wolverine story which takes place in a Thor comic, but stick with me here. In this alternate reality, Logan becomes the Phoenix. A few times while palling around with Thor, Logan both attacks King Thor and at other times tries intensely to help him. In Midgard's Final Doom, Phoenix Logan sacrifices himself so that King Thor can finally take out Doom. It's not only strange that there is an alternate future where Wolverine becomes Phoenix, although oddly enough, it actually isn't the only reality or time that this has happened in comics, but it's also strange that Logan sacrifices himself only to come back again later, because you know, I guess that Phoenix can never die and all that. I can't deny that I love how pretty and weird this one is though. It's pretty great. Number 1. Soul Survivor. Remember that time we learned that Wolverine kept having to fight the Angel of Death every time he died in order to come back? Yeah, that was a whole thing that happened. In volume 3 of Wolverine in issue 61, we get a story called Soul Survivor, where we see Logan bargaining to get the part of his soul back that was being held hostage. It's one of those weird stories that is the typical comic book story moment of, oh, that's what you thought happened, but what really happened was this and that and so on. Those good old major misdirects that retcon major stories and plot points away. Gotta love them. This story is so bizarre I doubt many of us remember that it exists, because it's just so weird. But hey, it does. Wolverine explains that when he dies he is forced to fight the Angel of Death, sometimes known as Azrael, sometimes known as Lazir. Winning puts his soul back in his body, which can then heal. Losing means losing his soul for good.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Sad Space Worms. World's Finest Comics issue 289. We see Batman and Superman as they decide to catch up on some bro time. You know, take a break from beating dudes up all day, you know, just talk it out. I mean, the dialogue itself is really great stuff. It highlights the mental health struggles superheroes go through, not being able to save everybody. It's meaningful, it's powerful dialogue. It's just Superman and Batman talking alone in the Fortress of Solitude. But what takes this issue to new heights, well, rather to new lows, is when Superman and Batman are interrupted by a meteorite crashing, and out of the meteorite emerges the crew. The crew being depressed space worms. Yep, they're attracted to sadness. That's actually how they found the two in the first place, because their super depression was just glowing. So these aliens need emotion to die. I mean, why didn't you guys just say so? I got the Titanic, I got Notebook on DVD, let's go. You guys will be gone in seconds, no problem. And before we move on guys, make sure if you haven't already, just toss us a quick thumbs up because it goes a long way here at our Fortress of Solitude. Thank you so much. Thanks. And number 9, we have Cat Fur Woman. Selena Kyle looked a bit different from the start, to say the least. We've seen numerous actors play the iconic Jewel Thief, with Zoe Kravitz playing her in the upcoming Robert Pattinson Batman. It's only fair to look back at her not so neat outfits. Well, in the first issue she appeared in, that being Batman 1 back in the 1940s, she was actually referred to as the Cat, rightfully so. Now, at this time her outfit looked a touch different. In Batman 3, she came out in this red cape, yellow dress, and fur mask. It looked weird. To think of the character as we know her now, and then to see her in this outfit, it kind of reminds me of in Harry Potter when Snape looks like Neville's grandmother. It wasn't until 1946 until her mask was changed to a more fitting look. Still not quite what we're used to, but definitely a step in the right direction. And then of course in the 50s she was deemed more of a sidekick to Batman rather than a villain, sporting a much cooler, less hairier look. And number 8, the Unstoppable Riddler. Usually when Batman punches you in the face, it kinda hurts. But if we look back at Edward Nygma in the Silver Age of comics, specifically in Batman 171, the Riddler is setting booby traps left, right, and center, but when it comes down to the Batman making contact with the skin, he laughs. Is this a Joker or Riddler? What's going on here? Well, it turns out if you get some local anesthetic, punches to the face don't feel as bad. You don't say. Even on the cover of this issue, Batman and Robin are both surprised. What's keeping the Riddler up? He takes our hardest knockout blows and bounces right back. But how? And number 7, Batman the Witch. Released in 1969, issue 186 of The World's Finest, we find Batman in quite the pickle. So Superman and Batman at this point have traveled back in time to solve a mystery. Classic good old time travel fun. Wonder where the comics will take us today. So they go back in time, and during their mission, they rescue a lady named Sylvia Ward. Now Sylvia was actually accused of witchcraft. Yeah, they went way back. So Superman and Batman save her, and then she thanks Batman by kissing him. Ah, super emotional, very nice. Right on the lips. Intimate, cool. And then Superman goes in to introduce himself, and Batman interrupts and takes her to the local bar. Okay. So Superman decides to use this era in his favor. So he dresses up as Batman, starts doing all this wacky stuff, doing all this witchcraft stuff. So much so that the town deems Batman a witch. He's about to be burned at the stake, and then a thunderstorm rolls in. Everybody leaves except for, Ben Franklin, who's just hanging out, doing tests and stuff. He's just there. That's fine. Just playing with kites, checking out lightning, doing his Ben Franklin stuff. He actually tries to free Batman with one of his experiments, but Superman doesn't let that happen. He stops the electrical current from reaching him with his Superman hands. Even Ben Franklin's like, alright, I'm ahead of him. So when Batman asks Superman why he's doing this, Superman says, figure it out yourself. Damn. So next time your friends start flirting with your crush, just, tell everybody in town that they're a witch. They'll handle them. Works every time. And number 6, the rainbow costume. Sometimes it's tough picking an outfit for the night. Maybe you wore something similar right before. The whole thing is just stressful sometimes. And yes, that includes superheroes. In 1937, issue 241 of Detective Comics, we find Batman on the cover with quite the dilemma. He changes up the colors of his costume a lot in here, but why? Well, this has to do with the Comics Code Authority. So in order to appeal to the public eye that comics weren't just dark and gritty, So this issue about Robin hurting his arm also happened to have Batman sporting some fun new colorful suits. Eventually just putting them all together and rocking the infamous rainbow suit, which is sick. He's like, what do you think about red? No? What do you think about green? Huh? Is fake green? I don't know. It's pretty neat to see on the page, but unfortunately, I don't think we're gonna get any crazy colorful suits on the big screen anytime soon. And number 5. Whale problems. So imagine you're Bruce Wayne, right? You're on a massive yacht, blasting some Dixie chicks. You're living it up, you're having a great time. Maybe you're showing off your fancy $6 million necklace. And then out of nowhere, a whale woman just blasts in and grabs it from you. We find this scenario in Batman 579. Bruce Wayne is, well, of course, shocked. He's like, excuse me, Miss Whale, can you return this gem to me? That would be great. Awesome, thanks a plenty. Now, of course, the whale doesn't cooperate, so Bruce heads to Gotham Aquarium to ask some questions. He meets Grace, a woman bound to a wheelchair who works at the aquarium. She gives the whole rundown on the orcas, how they fight other whales 3 times the size of themselves, and how she's working on a research project with orcas. But the funding ain't going so well. So of course you probably just figured out what's happening. She spends her time robbing from the rich, and instead of keeping the wealth for herself, she just donates it to charities. What a sweetheart. Not a bad gig at all. She ends up becoming an orca forever. God, that would suck. But don't worry, it doesn't last too long. Because in Detective Comics 819, she's killed by the great white shark. And number 4, the Bat Baby. Issue 147 of Batman has one of the funniest pages on a comic book title page. So we have Robin, just regular old Robin, and a baby sporting the mask and the cowl. And the businessman on the cover says, look out, it's Batman and Robin. Like, he even stutters too. He's like, it's Batman, I think. That's definitely Robin, but is it the baby? The Batman baby? And the weirdest part, he still has all the abilities of a full-grown Batman. So it turns out Nails Finney brought them into a trap, and now Batman has shrunk down to the size of a child. So the headlines were amazing in the news that week. Gangland turns Batman into baby. And the photo is just Batman just like, all moody, like at least smile or like put a thumbs up, throw a batarang, a little baby batarang. Robin at one point even has to carry him to the Batmobile. So what does Batman do? He embraces it, of course. He's like, fine, I'll dress like a baby, I'll become Bat Baby, I'll kick your ass. He does well though, or sorry, he does okay, rather, yeah. One of the headlines that you see next reads, Bat Baby does okay for a kid. Yeah, he's okay. He just rode a balloon up into the air and then fought 3 crooks as a baby, but he did okay, guys. It was okay. Don't get that too high, he's fine. Yeah, he had to ride a balloon up because his legs were too small. I don't think we'll ever get this comic on the big screen, but you know what? I'll do it. If I get money, I'll do it myself. I'll hire my cousin, he's like 4, let's do it. And number 3, Zebra Man. We talked a bit about costume changes earlier, but that's not the end of it. Whenever a popular character changes their outfits, fans aren't usually fond of the change. It's not bad, it's just different, So in Detective Comics 275, we meet the villain Zebra Man, who obtained his powers by discovering the lines of force. And no, I don't mean the same lines of force as Snowflame. I mean these lines of force, yeah. So Batman becomes this after Robin accidentally shot this ray at him. Now nobody can go near him or else the new force field zebra power will blast them back. He actually gets pretty sad about it too. Now of course things go back to normal, but the whole Batman zebra power idea, it's a little too weird for some, and I don't blame them. And number 2, Batmite. Of course I have to include the 1937 Detective Comics issue 267 because we meet Batmite. Right from the start, the opening line of this dude is just ridiculous. He's like, hey, I'm not an elf, I come from another dimension to help you fight. What would that be? Fun? Huh? This wasn't really loved by the readers, I mean of course, so in 1985 after Crisis on Infinite Earths, there wasn't really a rush to bring Batmite back. And lastly on our list we have Bear vs. Bat. Yeah, you heard me. This was issue 285 of Batman, and I mean, just look at the front page illustration. How do you not want to see how this ends? Well, this is quite the holly jolly issue, as it takes place of course during the annual Gotham tree lighting ceremony. And after Batman hears on the police radio that the tree is in flames, he rushes over to investigate, and then this is where he discovers a bear is actually living in this tree. Nice. Now, of course, it's a Batman villain version of a bear. It's not Winnie the Pooh, you know, it's kind of scary. So now Animal Control comes in and safely removes said bear so that everyone can just enjoy the night and be happy and move on. No, that didn't happen at all. Batman actually comes in and decides, you know what, I'm just gonna kick this thing in the neck a few times, see what happens. I mean, I love animals personally, but if an evil bear threw hands with Bruce Wayne, I'm sorry, I gotta take my phone out, we're filming. I'll do it this way, not even this way. I'll give it some respect, you know? The sideways filming. Kicking off the list at number 10, Sins Past. This 5-part storyline revealed that Gwen Stacy and Norman Osborn had an affair. Yeah, you heard me. To 2 children named Gabriel and Sarah. This one upset comic book fans quite a bit. So in The Amazing Spider-Man number 509, Peter gets this letter, right? And the letter is supposedly from a dead Gwen Stacy. Yeah, she's dead and gets a letter. The dead letter. Deader. I can't think of a pun there. That's a first. So Peter does a little detective work and runs some DNA tests on the letter, and he comes to find out that Gwen Stacy had actually given birth to twins. Her DNA was on the letter. This is happening. Mary Jane finally ends up filling Peter in on this dark secret, that Gwen Stacy had a secret affair with Norman Osborn 7 months before she died. Huh. Mary Jane even had a conversation with Norman about it, and she said she doesn't want Norman to take care of the kids or else they're just gonna end up turning into another version of Harry Osborn. I mean, you got a point. Right off the bat though, Norman's exposure to the Green Goblin formula caused these kids to be born early and they came out fully grown, and we see that in the comic. Also, ouch. Number 9, Amazing Spider-Man 100. Hey, it's Spider-Man, but he has 6 arms. Well, that's what happens when you ingest a chemical that's meant to neutralize your powers. Okay, well, as we see in almost every comic book ever, it doesn't go as planned. He grows 4 extra arms, having 6 in total. Yeah, 6 in total, got it, I'm good. The only way to save this Spider-Man's dilemma is Michael Morbius's blood. So the 6-armed Spider-Man, or also known as the Man-Spider, which is pretty fitting at this point. Man-Spider is gross too, like imagine waking up and there's this just Peter Parker with all those legs, like, hey, you thirsty? I'd be like, do you stop? He kind of reminds me of Machamp. I mean, it's always nice to see your favorite hero get an upgrade, but sometimes it's a bit too weird. I don't know. Like imagine if he had 6 arms in the movies. Like that's so much sweat. He'd be fighting bad guys and kicking ass, but he would be so exhausted. That's 6 arms that he has to swing constantly. There'd be so much sweat. It would look like a Sprite commercial. People just dripping. I'm here for it. I kind of like it. I wish he stayed like that. He didn't, but I kind of wish he did. Number 8, Ultimate Spider-Man 66. So when you think of 2 superheroes swapping bodies, you think, oh, that must be entertaining. I mean, Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer wasn't a great film by any means, but that concept was still pretty fun to play with. Well, with Spider-Man and Wolverine swapping bodies in Ultimate Spider-Man, things get weird. Very weird. So after Ultimate Spider-Man issue 66, Wolverine is now a total creep, more so than before. Now here's what happened. Mesmero switched their bodies up, so Peter was like, hey man, I really need you to go to school. Like, you are 15, we have to go, this is an important thing. So while Wolverine is in Peter's body, he at one point ends up kissing Mary Jane, and he even tried to sleep with her. And cue the jail. Is there a jail we can put this guy in? Let's put him in jail right now. Apparently all those walks to school in the morning made him realize that she truly is awesome. I mean, we always knew that, but he might have not. MJ told him that she wants to wait until they're older for that kind of thing, you know, that kind of thing. So thankfully, nothing happened. But this was for sure an issue or two we could have gone without. Trying to get that thought out of my brain. Find somebody your own age. Number 7, toxic love. Spider-Man Reign was issued in 2006 and it was quite interesting. So the 4-part story begins with an old Peter Parker, and many fans compared it to The Dark Knight Returns. Similar vibes for sure. Only difference is that in this story we have visions of a dead Mary Jane, and it's very disgusting. Sad old Peter Parker, no thank you. Plus, to make matters worse, so much worse, he actually caused her death in this issue. Yeah, how you ask? Well, his web shooter ended up giving Mary Jane cancer. And by web shooter I mean his, how do I say this? This is so weird. Number 6, Amazing Spider-Man 386. This one is neat. So right on the cover of this one, we see the text, "The most cataclysmic events of Spider-Man's life begins in this issue." And I'd say that I agree with that. Peter's parents returned. Hooray! So in issue 365, we meet them again. Peter comes home and Aunt May's like, hey, I'm just in the kitchen with some new guests. And Peter's like, whoa, guests? Huh, I love guests. I wonder who it is. Are those my parents? Yes, only they were evil androids. Fun, I guess. So his parents were actually robots and they were feeding back intel about Peter back to Chameleon. So they were just lying to Peter, obviously, and they explained that they didn't die because they were putting in motion this secret government plan, even saying they were in a Russian prison camp for 20 years. I mean, sure, we'll believe that, I guess, if we have to. Chameleon created these fake parents for Green Goblin, who already knew Spider-Man's secret identity, so what's the point? We don't know. Number 5, Spider-Man 3. Yeah, I'm going to the film category for this one because I gotta get this one off my chest. Spider-Man 2 is arguably one of the best superhero movies ever. Not even just Spider-Man movies, like as a superhero movie, this kicked ass, in my ever so humble opinion. Then Spider-Man 3 came out in 2007, everyone's like, yeah, here we go. Trilogies, they rock. And suddenly no one gave a shit about Spider-Man anymore. Including the people who apparently made the movie, I don't know. Venom was absolutely butchered. Sandman retconned the entire first movie's main driving force to make Peter Parker become Spider-Man, changing the whole Uncle Ben dying situation. Great. The movie itself just had a weird tone. Like I felt like I was watching 3 different Spider-Man movies at the same time. And all 3 of them had this different direction and they just weren't complete. And they just jammed it all into one movie. Like I love Sam Raimi, but the dancing scene, we didn't need that. We didn't need that. I mean, thank you for the thousands of memes. You've definitely supplied us some comedy, but I'm really hoping this other Spider-Man 3 with Tom Holland doesn't go this route. They already have too much on their plate, I think, for this one movie. I mean, Sinister Six being rumored to be in the movie, and then all these other Spider-Man actors returning. Don't get greedy. Just let it go organically. We sat through Iron Man 3. We're gonna sit through 5 more Spider-Man movies if we have to. Take your time. Don't mess it up. Number 4, Spectacular Spider-Man 12. Okay, so back in 1976, we got to see a redneck superhero, and I wish I was joking. Kinda. Do I? I don't know. Spectacular Spider-Man issue 12 opens with Peter having a nice game of tennis with Flash Thompson. And then in comes trouble. Trouble in the shape of Brother Power and Sister Sun. And one thing leads to another and they join hands, and of course now they can shoot beams out of their chest, like Care Bear style. And then in comes Razorback, the superhero who speaks like Ruth Langmore with that southern twang. Sorry, I'm gonna offend so many people with this one. Here we go. That southern twang. And to make matters even more weird, he looks like a pig. Like that's the outfit that he went with. I hope I never see this guy in a Spider-Man movie. Or if I do, I'm playing him. I'm gonna be like, what you doing up there, sticky boy? Number 3, Spectacular Spider-Man Volume 2. Issue 16, that is. This one I wish I could forget existed. Leave my brain, go, just get out of here. So we've seen Peter Parker change with his powers. I mean, he doesn't need the glasses. He gets some abs, starts getting ripped, whatever, yada yada yada. But how about becoming an actual spider and laying eggs? So after a not so chill run-in with the Spider Queen, she injects some pretty nasty goop into Peter Parker. And then the next thing you know, Peter has like 2 extra eyes. And if that wasn't enough for you to feel sick to your stomach, he ends up becoming an actual spider and gives birth to Peter Parker. Okay. Ew, first of all, Peter comes out looking the exact same. I mean, he's naked and shredded. Awesome. So the point of this is useless, I guess. I mean, he's reborn with organic web shooting abilities, which I didn't like. Made me feel gross. Like in the first movie when you see him, it's like, what does that feel like coming out? Ah, can't be pleasant. Probably like noodles, just noodles flying out of your veins. That's the grossest thing I've said on this channel. My favorite part has to be when he attends a Star Trek themed wedding, because those exist, and his disguise just happens to be perfect to mask what's going on in his life. Number 2, Attack of the Clones. No, not that one. The Clone Saga is one of the worst parts of the Spider-Man universe. Spider-Man far too long, rather. The story itself was a chore to keep up with fans. Characters coming back to life and dying again, it almost felt like a waste of time. Well, it definitely felt like a waste of time. The whole time you didn't know who the real Spider-Man was, but the story was so jam-packed full of this nonsense that it honestly got lost in this rubbish story. We didn't know if Peter or Ben was the clone, and they just kept dragging this one idea on, and in the end, it doesn't even matter. Linkin Park. And finally, for number 1 on our list, One More Day. This is a 4-issue story, but because of delays, it took 5 months to conclude. Love it, gotta love it. So of course that adds to the mix already with a not so well revived story. Okay, so the story begins in 2007 in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 544. And instead of the usual thugs or the enhanced scientist villain that Spider-Man usually faces, he makes a deal with the devil. The devil, of course, being Mephisto. So after Spider-Man revealed his identity in the Civil War storyline, people of course knew who he was, and now they're after him knowing his true identity, right? People want this guy dead, a lot of them. So after a bullet strikes Aunt May instead of Peter, he of course feels like he is to blame. So first, he goes to Iron Man to give him being the one who basically convinced Peter to reveal his identity. So he webs him up and gets all bad cop. It's actually pretty wild. So he talks to MJ in the next issue and explains how that bullet was meant for him. It's consuming him. Peter is feeling this guilt. Mephisto has entered the chat. Yeah, the devil shows up, offers a deal to Peter while Aunt May is currently dying. So MJ adds to this deal. She pitches basically the world will forget about Spider-Man's identity. Aunt May will live, but MJ and Peter will have never gotten married. So they hug one final time, and MJ explains that their love was always meant to be, and that whatever Mephisto does is unstoppable. And then, poof, the deal is sealed. The next day, Peter's like, oh man, another uneventful night, just the way I like it. And then that fast, all of that backstory was just gone. And fans weren't having it.
Number 10, Infinity. While Infinity is a story that is much bigger than Thor himself, his role in this story was pretty dark. He was forced to destroy a builder, blowing a clean hole through this alien creature. Thor was sent as Earth's emissary to negotiate their surrender and bow down to the will of the builders. But in reality, the Avengers had a trick up their sleeve and double-crossed the alien race who threatened the existence of the Earth and many other planets. Thor summoned his hammer Mjolnir from far away, smashing a hole clean through the builder's chest and proving just how terrifying of a foe he can be when needed, and how when needed, Thor will not hesitate to kill his opponents, like some other heroes might. After smashing a hole through the builder's chest, he finished them off with a hammer to the head. Splat. Number 9. If he be worthy. Dark stories usually come out of times when Thor is no longer worthy, and this is also one of those times. This story kicked off the 2014 run of Thor, where Thor lost his arm in a fight with Malekith. We were also first introduced to the initially mysterious Lady Thor in this issue, who was deemed worthy when it came to wielding Mjolnir and retrieving it from the moon, where it remained when no other Asgardians seemed able to lift it. Thor's loss of his arm would lead to him being very depressed for quite a while, and would in this case add injury to insult, as he was already reeling emotionally from being unable to retrieve Mjolnir. Although he would eventually get a sweet black Uru arm crafted because Odin refused to accept an armless son. Kinda rude. And likely added more stress to Thor to hear his dad say that. Sounds like, I'm not gonna have a son that's useless. Whoa, 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 just because he lost an arm he's useless? Rude. Number 8. Sundown. This story is both beautiful and dark, heart-wrenching and bright all at once. It's tragic. And hey, just because the story is dark doesn't mean it can't feature electric and bright colors, which of course in this issue comes from the amazing Matthew Wilson. Sheesh, I love this guy's colors, they're always so beautiful. In issue 705 of Mighty Thor, we watch a super sick Jane Foster as Lady Thor take on Mangog, and pretty much kill herself during the fight. In the end, she is forced to sacrifice Mjolnir in order to defeat Mangog, launching the villain and her hammer into the sun. Due to the fact that Jane was battling cancer at the time, every time she changed into Thor, due to that whole process, the progress of her chemo basically gets erased. And when she removes her helmet and changes back this time, she knows it will be her last. Her and Thor share one last kiss as she changes changes back from Thor to a very sickly and cancer-ridden Jane Foster, and she appears to die. Some truly bleak and beautiful writing here from Jason Aaron. Number 7. Midgard's Final Doom. In 2018's Thor, we get a flip back and forth between a younger Thor and an older future Thor, king of Asgard, but also the last Asgardian left. No matter what this version of Thor does as well, it seems there is nothing he can do to prevent the Earth from dying. But that doesn't mean he's not going to stop trying. In issue number 6, his main threat is a future Doom who is also Sorcerer Supreme in this future timeline. King Thor is joined by his old pal, Phoenix Force Wolverine, who ends up sacrificing his life imbuing Mjolnir with the Phoenix Force in order to help King Thor defeat Doom and save the world. Well, try to save the world. As beautiful as the art is, the story itself is pretty grim. Grim, but spectacular. Number 6. Thor First Thunder. Near the end of this story, Thor gives into warrior madness, and we see just how destructive Thor can be when his rage is left unchecked. He wreaks havoc on Manhattan, nearly killing Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four, as well as Jane Foster, while working in tandem alongside his brother Loki. In the end, he regains his senses, but for a while there, it was looking like Thor would have destroyed it all, burned it all, and blown it all down with his mighty power. You do not want to mess with an angry Thor, I'll tell you that much. Number 5. Thor vs. the Mysterious Radioactive Man. This was a story about Thor that actually appeared in the original Journey into Mystery series. Yeah, not all dark stories need to come from present day comics, by the way. In fact, without likely realizing it at the time, some of the darkest moments in comics history have actually come to us from incredulously outdated moments way back in the past. Journey into Mystery gives us one such story and moment. In this comic, we see Thor attempt to take on villain Radioactive Man. In this issue, we find out Radioactive Man's backstory as a nuclear physicist from China who gained radioactive powers. He was then sent on a mission to New York to challenge and defeat Thor. The ending of the story is what is the dark part though. When Thor attempted to send Radioactive Man back to China in a tornado, which Radioactive Man explained would cause him to reach critical mass before he touched down, Thor showed no regard for the innocent lives that could be affected and destroyed by basically the nuclear bomb that Radioactive Man would become on impact. As far as he was concerned, that was Radioactive Man and China's problem, not his. Wow. And he says that in the comic too. Yikes. Number 4. Ragnarok. Or at least one of. This Ragnarok story took place in 1998's Thor, starting in issue 80. It was part of the Avengers Disassembled event. Here we basically saw Thor take on a resurrected Surtur, who was brought back by Loki. Loki, what did you do? Surtur and his army took on the gods, defeating them one by one. Thor learned, however, that this was all part of a cycle, and that the gods were destined to fail and be reborn, giving energy to those who sit above in shadow. In other words, the gods of the gods. The story ends with Thor disrupting this resurrection cycle by basically destroying a tapestry, but at the supposed cost of his life and the lives of his people. At the end of the series, he's believed dead by his fellow comrades and heroes, though in reality he wasn't quite dead yet, but instead was revealed to be in a slumber-like stasis, resting before returning. Number 3. The Devourer King. This is the first arc in Donny Cates' Thor run, which just started earlier this year in January of 2020. The series started off with completely giving him a new dark look and dark and immensely powerful villain to go along with this look, who we'd see fully revealed at the end of issue number 4, the Black Winter, also known as the Star Plague. The Black Winter is the cosmic force that was known for wiping out the entire universe prior to the one that we have now, way back when Galen became Galactus. In fact, Thor is even forced to team up with Galactus in order to take on the Black Winter, and the frightening thing is, by comparison, both of these characters appear small, standing next to the celestial shadow of a monster that is the Black Winter. And also, Thor is pretty OP at this point, so that's something. Number 2. The God Butcher. The whole universe wasn't threatened by this villain in Jason Aaron's run, but all of the gods certainly were, and I mean all of the gods. In the story arc known as the God Butcher, we were introduced to Gore, a fearsome and well-written villain. Gore learns of the gods and basically blames them for everyone's suffering, and so sets out on a mission to kill them, armed with the Necro Sword, also known as the All Black, which we later discover via Donny Cates also happened to be the first symbiote. It's all connected, ooh. Which I love. Gore at one point also threatened all of the gods' existence with his own god bomb as well, which would kill all gods across all timelines and realities. A pretty scary reality for someone like Thor. Number 1. The Mighty Thor, Lord of Asgard. Or I guess you could just call it Lord of Asgard. I think we all know what we're talking about when we say that. This story quickly becomes quite dark. Thor ends up taking over for Odin as king of Asgard after his father is killed in a battle by Surtur. In this story, we saw Thor not only command Asgard but also decide to conquer and rule over Midgard, aka aka Earth. Those who oppose his rule are severely punished, locked away, or killed, and Thor basically becomes a tyrant. He also marries Enchantress and has a son with her. Eventually he realizes how awful his actions have been and how wrong he was when his son Magni, who has fallen in love with a human woman, confronts him. In the end, Thor decides the best course of action is to change the timeline so that none of this ever happened, erasing this bleak story and therefore causing it to be considered an alternate timeline in retrospect.
Number 10, Superman vs. Muhammad Ali. Yeah, you heard me. This one-shot made its debut back in 1978, written by Dennis O'Neil and Neil Adams. It featured the Man of Steel and of course Muhammad Ali. So, how is this a thing? Well, it was part of the all-new collector's edition, numbered C56. So basically this alien named Ratlar, who is part of a species known as the Scrub, visits Earth, and they demand that they pick their best fighter to go against theirs. Theirs being a behemoth named Hunya. If they refuse, well, the Scrub will then destroy the planet. So Muhammad Ali argues that since Superman isn't technically from Earth, he must be the one who fights. Ratlar is amused by this, as he wants to know who's better of the two. So he pins the two champs up against each other. Now, of course, you're thinking, dude, Superman would dust him, hands down, no competition at all. Well, the fight is set to take place on Boreas, which is orbiting a red star. So, no powers for Supes. So Muhammad Ali trains Superman to become a boxer. So they start training in Superman's Fortress of Solitude. Might as well train without powers, right? Get used to it? Well, the unlikely duo are given 24 hours to train, but using a time warping device, they're able to train for a couple months. Ratlar figures out the device is being used, and boom, training's over, boys, wrap it up, nice try. So the fight is broadcasted intergalactically, thousands tune in. Superman puts up a good fight, but ultimately Muhammad Ali is the greatest boxer ever to live, so Supes goes down. So now, Muhammad Ali has to fight Hunya. Even predicting which round he'll go down by. 4, he says it's 4. Now of course Muhammad Ali doesn't hold up too well against an alien at first, but he eventually knocks him out of the ring in the 4th round. Phew. See ya, dude. Number 9, Rainbow Hands. Yep, I said Rainbow Hands. Making its debut in 1958, the issue titled Superman's New Power. This might be even weirder than the Muhammad Ali one. So after detecting a disturbance under Metropolis, Superman checks it out, only to discover it's indeed an alien ship. So as soon as Clarky comes in contact with the ship, it explodes. Later on, he goes to fight some crooks, because you know how he does it. When he goes to use his powers, they're actually a bit different now. They're actually rainbow beams. Yeah, he shoots rainbows out of his fingers. How magical. This causes all of the crooks to become non-aggressive. And if that wasn't weird enough, soon after he discovers that he can shoot mini clones of himself at people. The people of Metropolis love this. I mean, of course they do. They get so attached to the clones that even Superman himself is like, hey guys, what about me though? Great, come on, I shot the clones. I'm the guy. Number 8, the Snare. This issue was released with Action Comics Volume 1, issue number 592 back in 1987. The cover of this issue, first of all, is enough to draw you in. I mean, it shows Superman with Big Barda, like they're making out. And who's in the background? Mr. Miracle. Just watching the whole thing in horror. He even says the line, "Superman and my wife?" And it's laid across the cover. So what's going on? Mr. Miracle goes home to find Darkseid sitting on his couch. Immediately asking where Barda is, Darkseid gives him a tape to play, which may be the scariest moment of his life. I mean, if Darkseid just handed me a tape, I'd be like, no, what did you do? No, I have to rewind it first. So he clicks play and sees Big Barda dancing for sleaze. They don't show it, but it's heavily implied that it's in nature. So Sleaze takes mind-controlled Barda and Superman to an adult film director. Yep, and his name is Evan Grossman. His idea is that the adult tape would make enough money to accumulate an army to go against Darkseid. I mean, you know, that or a charity. Sure. And then in comes Mr. Miracle to save the day, releasing the two from Sleaze's mind control. That would have been a real awkward brunch if Mr. Miracle didn't show up. Quite the miracle if you ask me. Number 7, Super Menace. Coming from Superman Volume 1, issue 137, titled The Super Brat from Krypton. This one's fun and, of course, super weird. So Superman has a twin, or clone, rather. That's right, so when Jor-El shot Kal-El into space after the destruction of Krypton, that ship ended up crashing into a derelict space satellite and was then duplicated. The ship and the super baby inside of it. Now there's 2 of each. Now of course we know what happens to Superman's ship, but what about the other one? That craft was found by criminals named Derek and Bonnie. So they see this as a golden opportunity to raise a supervillain. Not a bad idea, honestly. I mean, it's pretty Alright, cool. So they have this little super bat, and they tell him not to be seen until the right time, because that would be pretty bait, you know? So a kryptonite meteor crashes, and they realize that it doesn't affect little super bad. Oh. So years go by and the super bad baby named himself Super Menace. That name does sound cool, alright, it's cooler than what I was saying. And it's finally time to make his debut and go against Superman. So they fight, and Superman used his X-ray vision to see that this clone has something off about him. Super Menace is pissed now because Superman's like, yo, you don't even have a normal body? What's going on with you? And then Super Menace makes it rain kryptonite meteors. This almost kills Superman until Super Menace decided he doesn't want to be a Super Menace anymore. So he saves Superman and goes back home. And that's when he turns his body back into raw energy, destroying him and his not so nice adoptive parents in the process. Number 6, Red and Blue 162. That's right, Superman Volume 1, Issue 162, titled The Amazing Story of Superman Red and Superman Blue. It's an all imaginary issue. So that's cool, I think. We just talked about Superman's evil clone. Well, that's not the first time they've had the idea of another Superman. So the Kandorians aren't too happy with Superman at this point. He was supposed to enlarge Kandor, cure kryptonite, and stop all the crimes ever on Earth. And he couldn't do it. Wow, what a loser, dude. You're fired, Superman. That's really, you can't do all those things? Embarrassing, if you ask me. So he splits himself up into two identical beings, which, you guessed it, are Superman Red and Superman Blue. And they both crush it. They recreate Brainiac's enlarging ray, they bring Kandor back to its original size on an all-new Krypton. Step 2, get rid of all the evil. Easy peasy. The Red and Blue Super 2 create an anti-evil ray, fancy, and ends all crimes on Earth. Superman Red marries Lois Lane, and Superman Blue marries Lana Lang. And they all live happily ever after, even Lex Luthor. Number 5, ants.
Ants. Ants. Ant-Man.
That's right, we got ants. Coming at you from Action Comics Volume 1, Issue 296, The Invasion of Ants. And it sounds just as crazy as you would guess. The cover alone is super weird and almost inviting. It shows Superman on the side of a building with an ant mask on. He's even saying the words, "Follow me, ant soldiers, buzz 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 buzz, we must capture Lois Lane, buzz 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 buzz, she will be our queen." Okay, you got it. So after a colony of giant ants was mutated from a nuclear war on another planet, they decided to come and check out Earth, as they all do, because we're so cool and all. So Superman uses red kryptonite radiation to give himself an ant's head. Not a mask. See, I said mask earlier, I was throwing you off. It's a head, he's got an ant's head. And he communicates with them. This is like the ultimate amalgam character. Clark Pym, anybody? I'd pay to see that. Number 4.
Run! It's Godzilla!
Yep, we even got flaming dragons. Superman Volume 1, Issue 142, appropriately titled Flame Dragon from Krypton. So Clark Kent and Lois Lane are heading to the Metropolis Space Exploration Convention Center because somebody apparently captured a space beast. Yeah, okay. So they arrive and yeah, there's straight up a space beast. Soups knows what it is. It's actually called the Kryptonian Flame Beast. I could have guessed that one, I mean, come on. So it sprays fire all over Clark, and all that is left is still Clark, but his regular clothes have been burned away. So he starts fighting the beast as Superman. And then the Flame Beast swallows a red kryptonite meteor. So Superman keeps his distance. He knows what's going on. He's dodging hits. He's waiting until the red kryptonite's effects starts taking action. And it weakens the beast, so Superman splashes it with water, freezes it with his icy dentine ice breath, and he hoofs it out to space. Then when Lois returns to the scene, she sees Clark all bandaged up, and the doctors are like, oh, he has minor burns, and she buys it, of course. The doctors being Batman and Supergirl in disguise. Number 3, Red Kryptonite. Action Comics Volume 1, Issue 283 has a plot that I would pay millions of dollars to see on the big screen. It would be so weird to see this. Titled The Red Kryptonite Menace, we find Jandex and Zogar, two chameleon criminal men from the future. So they travel back in time and they set up camp on a hidden island in Metropolis Bay. Their goal is to attract red and green kryptonite from space. So of course the military is onto them, but they disguise themselves. How, you ask? Oh, as a pile of rocks and a tree. And it works, because that's how easy it is. They set a trap with red kryptonite and plan to get Superman to go near it. The plan works like a charm, and upon Superman's arrival, his health starts to decline. So he wishes for thick fog, and it comes true. Okay, so what's next? Superman can grant himself wishes now? How is this possible? Okay, so then he wishes for, you guessed it, Sherlock Holmes to come and help him. This red kryptonite allows for him to wish for Sherlock Holmes. Benedict or Robert, which one did you go with? We're curious. Number 2, the Bat Witch. And no, I don't mean a sandwich made of bats, because that would be disgusting. And this channel, we don't show anything disgusting here. Batman getting his hands and head cut off though? That's more like it. Now we're talking. Released in 1969, issue 186 of The World's Finest, we find Batman in quite the pickle, to say the least. So Superman and Batman have actually traveled back in time to solve a mystery of a broken bust that resembled Batman. So they go back in time and they rescue a lady named Sylvia Ward. Now Sylvia was actually accused of witchcraft. So Superman helps her stay afloat and Batman swims with her back to shore. And then she thanks Batman by kissing him right in the lips. Then Superman goes to introduce himself and Batman's like, nah, I got this, and takes her to the local bar. Oops! So Superman decides to use this era in his favor. He dressed up as Batman and starts doing like crazy witchcraft stuff. So much so the town deems him an actual witch. So he's about to be burned at the stake and then a thunderstorm rolls in. And everyone's like, I love watching people burn but can't stand the rain. We're out of here. Everybody leaves except for, you guessed it, Ben Franklin. Sorry, what? Yeah, Ben Franklin, like the Ben Franklin. He's just hanging out there apparently. He actually tries to free Batman with one of his experiments, but Superman doesn't let that happen. Eventually, even Ben Franklin's like, alright man, you're on your own. See ya, dude. And when Batman asks Superman why he's doing this, Superman says, figure it out yourself. So next time you catch your friend maybe flirting with your crush, just frame them for witchcraft. It works every time. And finally, number 1, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen. Volume 1, issue 116 to be exact. Okay, I know I said this list wasn't in a particular order, but I can't not do this one last. This issue came out in 1968 and I don't think we'll ever see it on the big screen, because if we do, I'm going to walk out of said big screen. The cover alone is enough. I mean, it shows Superman flying in saying, Jimmy, what's gotten into you? Why are you acting like an ape? And then the actual ape on the cover says, because he is an ape, Superman, in my body, I'm the real Jimmy Olsen. Yeah, they switched bodies. I'm surprised that camera didn't explode in Jimmy the Ape's hand. Apes are so strong, it's insane. So after a malfunction of a machine, they switched bodies. So Jimmy Olsen's body, Jimmy Olsen, starts screaming around like an ape. But Jimmy Olsen, the real person, however, the dude embraces it. He buys a green pinup suit, even a cool hat. He rocks the look. He even goes to work. He's like, you know what? I'm gonna be a simian sensation here at the office. You tell him, Jimmy.